Welcome to the IEEE Metaverse Congress Session 3, Developing and Deploying the Metaverse. Good morning and good evening, depending on where you are. So we have some housekeeping items I need to briefly let you know. I don't have to read all of them, but I think you can read. So the attendee lines are automatically muted, and to ask questions, you can use the Q&A feature. I think that's the most important things. So first of all, it's our honor to have opening remarks by our IEEE President, KJ Liu. So Jane, could you?
If you just click through right there, it'll play on the.
Okay, I got it.
Hello.
Do I need to share another screen? I'm not sure.
You could just hit play. We could hear it great.
Okay.
Everyone, I am Ray Liu, and I have the great privilege to serve as the 2022 President of the IEEE. I want to share a warm welcome to all of the participants. For those of you who are already IEEE members, thank you. I am honored to be your colleague. Let me share my vision with you. For those of you who are not, perhaps my 3 following remarks will provide you with some insight into what IEEE does, what it can do for you, and what we can accomplish together. Do you know IEEE is no longer the Institute of Electrical and Electronic Engineer? It is simply IEEE. My vision is to make it simply your professional home. It is the home of engineers, scientists, technologists, practitioners, and entrepreneurs who form the community of IEEE. Our members are experts from the highest excellence of industry and academia and are in every vital area of technology, spanning almost every area one can think of. Our members are computer scientists and electrical, mechanical, and electronic engineers. They are physicists and biologists who use our tool in their daily work. They are entrepreneurs and marketeers who build their business on our technology. They are technicians who demonstrate their proficiency through their technical work. And they are teachers, share their knowledge with their students of science and technology. Long gone are the days when a technologist can count on lifelong employment with a single company. My plan is to build IEEE to be our members' home base, the home for your entire career, to help you with career growth through continuing learning and skill training, job opportunities that offer better career and professional opportunities, mentoring by connecting you with respected colleagues who can guide you, and peer networking by building a strong sense of community. In IEEE, your professional home, we have suites of product and service, including publications, conference, lifelong learning opportunities, society and council, session and chapter, and standards, all available for our members to personalize to meet their desired needs. From when you first join IEEE as a student member until retirement, this professional home offers the product and service required for every stage of your career. IEEE can help ensure you have successful career development with great prospects even when changing jobs. Through the continual learning of practical content and training of new skills relevant to your work to advance your career, IEEE not only provides technology tools, but also personal connections that can help mentor and nurture your career path. Most important, IEEE help professionals grow their soft skills, such as leadership and the ability for cross-discipline collaborations. In essence, IEEE offer you a whole new way of thinking and self-knowledge to consider while advancing along your career path, and for you to use throughout your life. IEEE is a community of career support and professional growth with worldwide network. IEEE is your professional home. I encourage all of today's participants, IEEE members and non-members, to engage with IEEE's activity and initiative, inspire participation from fellow colleagues, and maximize all that your IEEE membership does for you, for our professional communities, for the benefit of humanity. Thank you. I wish you all a successful event. Please take care of yourself and each other.
Thank you. So according to our agenda, by the way, I saw Sri, you just joined us. Would you like to take over? Or, well, I can just continue. So according to our agenda, next is my presentation regarding the road to the metaverse, grand challenge, and the roadmaps. So let me make it a full screen. So this is a very big topic regarding the road to the metaverse. We know that metaverse has been a buzzword since last year. Different people have different visions about the metaverse. Some people, including me, we think metaverse is a long-term vision, and we have grand challenges on the road to the true metaverse. So let me share with you my opinions today. Of course, before I share my opinions, I need to disclaim that the opinions expressed here are the opinions of myself, not necessarily the opinions of IEEE or IEEE SA. So first of all, I'd like to start with my definition of the metaverse. So I try to be inclusive, considering both the origin of the term metaverse and also the latest advancement during over the past 3 decades. So here's my definition, based on the philosophy that to be is to be perceived. Everything, including our current universe, could be just our perception. So my definition of metaverse is a kind of reference experience in which the outside world is perceived by the users. The users could be humans or non-humans, such as AI or even animals, as perceived by the users as being a universe that is built upon digital technologies, as either a different universe, which we call virtual reality, or a digital extension of our current universe, augmented reality, or digital counterpart of our current universe, digital twin. So, which means, in my opinion, there are 3 major categories of metaverse: virtual reality, augmented reality, and the digital twin. With that being said, I try to develop something called a metaverse technology landscape. So some people tend to claim that everything is metaverse, every technology is metaverse technology. I'm not in favor of that, because in that, if you are doing that, you would look like you are claiming that the entire ICT industry or the entire ICT technologies are metaverse technologies, which does not really make much sense. So I'd like to divide them into supportive technologies and core technologies. Supportive technologies include those general purpose technologies such as computation, storage, communications, data and intelligence, And the core technologies, which are really the key or the core to metaverse, I divided them into three categories: senses and actions, which could be virtual senses, virtual actions, or real senses and real actions, based on sensors and actuators, and based on brain-machine interface, or body-machine interface, or programming interface, to feed the input and get the output from either human or creature, or NPC and AI, or other machines. And the second category, I call that persistent computing. We will be addressing that later at a panel. So the persistent computing is about how to create persistent virtual worlds. The underneath engines include physics engines, graphics engines, and engines for sounds and things like that. And then we will have modeling, designing, and digital content creation technologies such as PGC, professional generated content, and UGC, user generated content, and artificial intelligence plus PGC, and artificial intelligence plus UGC, and artificial intelligence generated content, and also digital twin generated content. To support virtual map, virtual scenes, virtual objects, and virtual characters. And lastly, we have an optional component, which I call that digital finance and economy, including digital assets, which most of them would be virtual assets, but there could be other digital assets such as IP in the digital world. And they may or may not be based on decentralization, and the decentralization may or may not be based on blockchain. So that's my view of the metaverse technology landscape. With that being said, I would like to emphasize that it's not too easy to implement that, especially in terms of how to create a true metaverse, a metaverse that is indistinguishable from our current universe. So I have some grand challenges identified. The first one is about virtual senses and actions. This is my favorite example. We know that we have been talking about using XR technologies to simulate like your sight, hearing, smell, and taste, and other kinds of senses. But even we can do a perfect job about those kind of senses, we are still not able to simulate the feeling that your body feels after you drink alcohol, generate dopamine, and then you feel pleasure produced after your consciousness or your brain will feel after drinking alcohol. So that is a grand challenge in my mind, in my opinion. In other words, this is about how to achieve comprehensive and ultra-realistic virtual senses and actions. I have some explanation about this. I think currently what we are doing with all kinds of XR devices is about the interface marked in green, the interface between your senses and the outside world. So we are doing well for sight and hearing because we have found the basic elements of sight and hearing, like we have the basic colors for any kinds of vision signals, vision input, and we know that all kinds of any sound can be composed by different frequencies of sound waves. So that's the reason why we are doing a relatively good job to simulate vision and hearing input. But for other kinds of senses, such as touch, we have no idea what the basic elements are, what the basic building blocks are. And so do the smell and the taste. We have no idea what are their basic elements that we can use as building blocks to simulate all kinds of input. But with that being said, as my previous example indicates, even we can achieve all of this, all kinds of senses, we are still not able to simulate other kinds of feelings, such as the your feeling after you drink alcohol. That's a good example. So in my opinion, we have to move to another interface, which is marked in red on in this diagram. The interface between your consciousness and your senses, which means we need a brain-machine interface. Those input directly feed into your consciousness. That's the ultimate solution. But with that being said, we have a long way to go, because currently all of our solutions are still based on wearing wearable headsets and devices, which are I can call them a body-machine interface, but they are not supposed to work as the brain-machine interface. What the brain-machine interface could provide. So that's the first grand challenge. The next one is about virtual worlds. So I wanted to use water again as an example. So when we are talking about water, especially virtual water, it should supposed to be not only look like water, but also be fine-grained, so that you can jump into that, you can swim in the water, the virtual water, and you can even use the virtual water to wash your virtual avatar, which means every virtual water particle need to conform to physical laws, and they need to be working with each other, interact with each other, following physical laws such as fluid mechanisms. And also, ultimately, even physics scientists cannot find any flaws to tell that this is a virtual world. So that's the ultimate goal. In order to do that, we need to know how to build a persistent, large-scale, and fine-grained, and more importantly, physically self-consistent virtual world. So that is another grand challenge I'd like to point out. But we also already see some great efforts towards that direction. The famous examples include Second Life and Minecraft. So their virtual worlds are built with basic building blocks. So I think, in my humble opinion, that is on the right track. We just need to keep improving, making them larger scale and finer graded. So that's another grand challenge and also a direction for the technology evolution. And I also want to talk about AR or MR, augmented reality or mixed reality. So the grand challenge I see here is the integration between virtual objects and the real world. The example I'd like to use is from the movie Blade Runner 2049. So in that movie, there's a AR assistant, the girl. So she is a virtual object, and my question here is that how can make our AR or MR advanced enough so that you as a user, you can feel, you can touch such a virtual, you can feel like you are touching such a virtual avatar. So that's another grand challenge I'm thinking of, but probably we may not have a solution at all. Another question is that could a virtual bullet kill a real person? So which means there may be some fundamental restrictions or fundamental limits in terms of what can we do with augmented reality or mixed reality. That's probably not only a technical problem, but a content problem that we need to avoid facing such kind of grand challenges when we are designing the AR or MR experiences. So that's another thing. And this fourth thing, well, let me try to predict the roadmap of the three grand challenges I just mentioned. So in terms of the virtual senses and actions, I think today we are able to do the, as I call that, read-only brain-machine interface, which means by thinking, you can have some simple actions such as typing in a keyboard or driving a toy car, those kind of simple actions. But moving forward, by 2025 or earlier, we may still based on read-only brain-machine interface, but we may be able to support all kinds of actions, which means by simply thinking, you will be able to smoothly control your avatar in a virtual world. You don't have to use any other devices or gestures. You can just thinking. You can just think, and then your avatar will behave as your own body. So that's the next milestone. But moving forward, in order to achieve a true metaverse, in my opinion, that would be a completely immersive and indistinguishable virtual world experience. We need read and write brain-machine interface to simulate all kinds of senses, all kinds of input from the outside world. I would expect that would happen by 2035. So we can have some read and write brain-machine interface to support that feature. And then let's talk about the virtual worlds. Today, like the examples that Second Life and Minecraft are showing, we are actually being able to build a virtual world with virtual blocks at the block level. Moving forward, along with the advancement of computation, storage, and other technologies, my expectation is that we can achieve the go to a finer graded, so at the let's say virtual dust level. And moving forward, there are already some research on this topic, how to model elementary particles. So my expectation is that by 2027, we will be able to simulate virtual world, maybe a small one, but at the elementary particle level. Regarding the integration between virtual objects and the real world, today we already have some simple interactions between virtual objects and the real world. For example, it's not difficult to use a virtual panel on your wall to control your air conditioner. So that's just some simple protocols, smart home protocols, things like that. Moving forward, I think the first milestone AR or MR need to solve is the seamless appearance of virtual objects in the real world. Light field technologies, in my humble opinion, would be the therapy, the solution for that, the seamless appearance. And then next thing would be the complex interactions between virtual objects and the real world. I can anticipate more standards behind that to make those kind of things happen. So from the user perspective, you may feel like you are just doing some simple interactions, controlling some virtual, or play with, interact with some virtual objects. But behind that, there will be lots of protocols and data exchanges. So that's something I think standards could play an important role. Beyond these three grand challenges, I'd like to point out another one, which I recently learned, which is about decentralization. So many people are thinking that there could be some value if metaverse is decentralized. But I'd like to point out that today, most of the decentralized infrastructures that people think that is decentralized are not really decentralized. Bitcoin is an example. Bitcoin has only 12,000 nodes worldwide, and in centralized mining pools. I got these pictures just this morning to show that Bitcoin, the infrastructure itself, is actually centralized, even more centralized than many other infrastructures operated by some big companies. And Ethereum has some similar problem. So their nodes are being run through centralized web providers like Amazon, And you can see the picture showing that most of the Ethereum nodes are running on Amazon, which could be, I don't think this is a true decentralization. If we talk about ownership and the governance of the infrastructure, this could be a central point of failure. So I'd like to say that many people, when we are talking about blockchain-based infrastructure, we take it for granted that this is supposed to be decentralized, but it is not. So in order to have a truly decentralized metaverse, we still have lots of things to do. That's the first grand challenge I'd like to point out, although I don't have a prediction for the roadmap or for this grand challenge. So with that being said, I'd like to point out that I don't want to say that metaverse is still far away, so we cannot benefit from that for now. The technology could be not ideal, but start being usable and useful, such as like a videotape. If we compare VHS with our current 4K or 8K TVs, their quality are it's just far from what we can have for today. But in the old days, we still enjoyed watching them. That's an example that technology could be useful and usable before it becomes ideal enough. So I'd like to also mention that in IEEE, we recently approved a new standards committee called the IEEE Metaverse Standards Committee, officially approved by IEEE SA Standards Board on September 21st. This is probably, according to, as far as I know, probably the first Metaverse Standards Committee in the major international or global SDOs at the Standards Committee or technical committee level. The scope is to develop and maintain standards, recommended practices, and the guide for metaverse, virtual reality, and augmented reality. So also today we have our third session of the IEEE Metaverse Congress, which is a flagship series of metaverse related sessions in terms of, well, in order to provide a global and a comprehensive view of the metaverse. So with that being said, that's the end of my presentation, and I thank you for attending this webinar, this session, and I put my contact information on my screen, so feel free to contact me. Thank you.
Yuan, I suggest that you continue with the introductions because this goes until very late in my night. So.
Okay, so well, so I'd like to continue moderating this session. Our next speaker is Neil Trevitt. Neil is chairman of the Metaverse Standards Forum, and he is also the president of the Kronos Group and the VP of NVIDIA. So Neil, you can share your screen. Yeah, we can say that now. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here, and I'm going to be talking about the newly formed Metaverse Standards Forum and the work we're doing to foster open interoperability standards for an open metaverse. And a brief introduction. My day job is at NVIDIA. I've been the Kronos president, which is a standards organization, for around 20 years, and currently chairing the Metaverse Forum. So very happy to be here. Before I get rid of that thing. Oh, well. Oh, there it goes. All right. So the first question that we normally get asked when people hear about the forum is, so what is your definition of the metaverse? And the perhaps surprising answer is that we don't have one, and we don't think we need one. I think, though, most people would agree at a broad level that the metaverse is going to be some mixture of the connectivity like the web mixed with spatial computing and immersiveness, with a healthy sprinkling of AI and machine learning, and probably some kind of decentralized ID and transactions. I think the essence of the metaverse and the interest in the industry is because we're bringing together a lot of emerging technologies all at once. the advanced realistic graphics rendering, XR technologies, machine learning, which is going to be used for semantic understanding in many ways, and user-created content, a scale of geospatial data and understanding, some kind of blockchain maybe, and so many things are coming together. We're essentially going to be a chaotic time in a good way. And having so many novel technologies coming together, I think, makes it difficult to create a top-down plan for what the metaverse is going to be. I think rather instead we're going to be entering a Darwinian phase where there's going to be continual experimentation from the bottom up, and we're going to get a continual stream of opportunities starting today, successes and failures, and that's where standards can play a role. Once there are successful services and products and technologies, then open standards can help amplify and foster their success by providing cross-vendor, cross-platform interoperability and portability, which creates larger business opportunities by removing friction points to deploying those technologies, and hopefully by having open standards at the right time, it gives us the chance to create a substrate, a foundation of the metaverse that will be open and equitable to all. So open standards, why are they important? What is their superpower? Well, open standards, of course, in concept are very simple. It's just a way to enable multiple implementations of a technology by multiple vendors in the industry. And we do that through having a shared, very precise specification and typically conformance testing. So people that implement the specification can be sure that they've done it correctly. So we have true interoperability. The fact that we can have multiple implementers means that the technology can fan out across the industry, multiple implementers addressing multiple markets, multiple price points, multiple use cases. You can truly make technology ubiquitous. And this is in contrast to open source, which is also awesome, but it's very different. Open source is focusing multiple implementers on one implementation, which can be a very effective way of sharing resource to create an implementation. But it is very different to open standards. But they're both, of course, fundamental to building the metaverse. And open standards often use open source for building their ecosystem of tools and samples, etc. But it's important to understand the difference and use the right tool at the right time. And so standards making technology ubiquitous, I think sometimes we forget just how ubiquitous standards are and what in a fundamental way they are weaved into our everyday activities. We're all using WebEx here today, either on mobile phones or laptops or PCs. That means we're all right now using hundreds of hardware and software interoperability standards. Indeed, plugging your laptop into the wall to get a charge is using another whole standards infrastructure that has become so ubiquitous that we literally just take it for granted. Building the metaverse is going to take a constellation of standards to bring all of these technologies together. No one standards organization would be able to create such a diversity of interoperability standards. And so we're going to need many, many excellent standards organizations creating standards within their areas of expertise. And there's a lot of them. And that was really the genesis of the need for the Metaverse Standards Forum. We in the standards community started to be approached by companies that were sincerely wanting to use standards to build the metaverse, but were faced with this problem of having to understand what the landscape of standardization was for the metaverse, talking to dozens of different standards organizations, that may or may not be talking to each other, trying to identify who's doing what, where the gaps are, what works, what doesn't. And in the end, the industry, I think, was quite clear that maybe the standards community could do a better job of coordinating. And that's the very simple idea behind the Metaverse Standards Forum. It's a venue for any organization to come and communicate and coordinate over the creation of open interoperability standards that are going to be relevant to the metaverse as we build out this new platform. And we want to make, so the forum launched back in July, so it's only a few weeks old, but we wanted to make it as accessible as possible. So it's open to any organization. There's no participation fee. There's no NDA. The forums are sharing public information. There's no IP framework because, importantly, we're not another standards organization. That would just make the problem even worse. Instead, we're just a venue for the existing standards organizations to coordinate and cooperate and to effectively interface to the wider industry. So if we're successful, we can build better metaverse standards sooner. That is the basic idea. The other key principle behind founding the forum was to keep it action-based, keep it pragmatic, and focused on short-term moving the needle, making a difference in the short term as well as the longer term through pilot projects, software tooling, interoperability testing, so we can actually see what works in practice and what doesn't work, and enable industry to feed requirements, use cases, testing data into the existing SDOs, the existing standard development organizations, so they can be enabled to produce the standards that we need sooner and faster. So we launched back in June, again, just a month or two ago, 3 months ago. We had 37 founding organizations, and we thank the founders for their confidence and their willingness to put their name to what was then an unknown endeavor. And I was expecting another couple of dozen to join, and we can start work. We have some excellent organizations here, though it gave us credibility. And as of September, we now have 1,700 organizations and counting. So this was a lot more interest and participation, I think, than anyone had expected. And I think it speaks to a couple of hopeful things. One is that there obviously is interest in building the interoperability standards that we need, and to try to make sure that the metaverse is open standards based to the benefit of everyone who participates. And also the willingness to participate in the creation and the fostering of those standards. So of the 1,700 members, we have a bunch of great organizations. I've listed some of them there, but all the organizations, from the very largest down to small startup companies, everyone is welcome in the forum. But of course, having so many organizations also leads to a challenge, and that is, how do you organize so many participants for effective decision-making and action? So since we were formed, we've been busy slicing and dicing. We're going to create domain working groups that can bring together the interested companies in workable numbers to do real projects and real work. And we're following a 5-step program to establish those working groups. The first ones have already started. First, we gathered the topics that were the key opportunities and pain points from the members. We gathered over 200 topics, and it's still ongoing. That's a living document. We are gathering those topics into domains, related domains, and we're creating working groups where there are volunteers to lead and to promote those working group activities from the membership. The first working group is already approved, and we approved it last week, and that's to create a Metaverse Standards Register, basically an openly, publicly accessible database of all of the standards that are being developed throughout the industry that are relevant to the metaverse. It turns out there is no such thing, and we hope that will be a useful resource for the industry, and as well as guiding the forum as to where the gaps and opportunities are for our own activities. And you can see here on the slide, we've also just last week approved working groups for digital asset management, real and virtual world integration, digital twins and IoT, and hopefully in the next week or two, we'll have 3D asset interoperability, avatars and digital fashion, privacy, cybersecurity and identity. And we want to establish an ongoing pipeline of domain working groups that are relevant to the industry and the membership. The way we're organized is, again, we're trying to keep it simple. So any organization can join. As organizations join, they can decide to go on the yellow path or the purple path on this slide. The yellow path is participants, and they have access to all of the plenary meetings we have and the working group meetings that are going to be established. Or they can go the purple path and they can do all of that. Plus, they get a seat on the oversight committee, which helps the organization and developing the processes for how the forum operates. If the members want to put that extra effort into helping the forum organize, they are welcome to choose to do that. Just to finish up, I know I'm getting to the end of my time here. Just wanted to give an example of what a potential project that would be undertaken by a group like the 3D Asset Interoperability Working Group that we hope will start work in just a few weeks. This is a 3D example because that's my personal kind of expertise, but it is just an example. And I think in many of the other domains that we mentioned, there would be similar kinds of interesting questions and challenges and opportunities that pragmatic projects could help progress, as we hope this one will. So in the field of 3D assets, there are two quite widely adopted technologies and standards. One is a Chronos standard, which is GLTF, which is, we like to say it's like the JPEG of 3D. It's a 3D asset format that is easy to transmit and unpack and to process. It's being widely used across the industry, including in the web. And then we have USD, which is an open source project currently. It's originated by Pixar, and Pixar have originated this awesome technology through authoring their movies, and USD is now being much more widely used in additional markets, and is a technology that enables large teams to cooperate and collaboratively build 3D content. So today, USD and GLTF are quite complementary. USD for authoring, GLTF for deployment, and GLTF tries hard to be a good distillation target for USD. But as both groups upgrade from being 3D asset formats into metaverse standard formats with behaviors and attributes for physics simulations, there's a danger that they're going to start to overlap. GLTF is building in scene composition. USD is looking how to enable USD to be deployable. And so we're kind of heading towards each other. Both groups, I think, are really interested and willing to not just go smoosh into each other, but to figure out how we can coordinate and cooperate, how these technologies evolve in a rational way for the good of everyone involved and the wider industry. And the forum is the place where we can bring these organizations together together with users and anyone who wants to have an input and a visibility into how this is evolving. And some of the kind of projects, again, just as an example, is let's not just talk about the roadmaps, let's actually try it out and see what's working and not working today. So, for example, let's use USD, let's create some USD assets, let's make them publicly available. Let's try distilling them down into GLTF. What breaks? What didn't make it through that distillation pipeline? Did all the materials make it through? Did the behaviors make it through? Let's make those GLTF assets publicly available and invite any engine and platform vendor who wants to try using either the USD or the GLTF assets to try them in their engine. Again, what works, what didn't work, where are the gaps, where do we need to do better? I think any standards organization would love to have that kind of real world data to help them do a better job and develop and progress and support the standards that they have in a productive way for the industry. So just to finish up, just an FAQ, just to reiterate a couple points. Is the forum going to try and define the metaverse? No, we're not. Again, we're instead focusing on pragmatic short-term projects that we think will add value to the industry. We like to say we're not trying to build the metaverse cathedral. We're trying to bake the metaverse bricks that we know we're going to need to build the eventual cathedral, whatever it is. Is the forum a new standards organization? No, we're just a coordination forum for the existing industry and standards organizations. Are we competing with the many other standards organizations focused on the metaverse? No, we're trying very hard not to compete with other organizations, many of whom are doing, of course, excellent work. We just hope we can add value for any organizations that want to participate in the forum. We hope we can provide more visibility. We hope we can provide more input, and so the existing organizations, can be accelerated, and this would be a useful forum for them to accelerate their own goals. And why is Kronos, the Kronos Group Standards Organization, why are we hosting this? It's our membership asked us to, and it's within our non-profit mission to encourage this kind of interoperability. So we're happy and honored to be the logistical host. We're actually fronting the costs to get this forum off the ground. But Kronos gets no special membership rights, and we're happy to work with the forum members to evolve the organization into whatever form the industry desires. So that's the end of my presentation. If this is of interest to you, to your organization, and you think your organization could benefit and provide value to this cooperative endeavor, then you would be very welcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Neil. So, of course, we have a very full agenda. So for Q&A, you can use the chat window, and then we will have panels later. So our next speaker is supposed to be Roberto Sirocco, who is co-chair of the IEEE Digital Reality Initiative. But looks like we have some technical problems here. So I noticed that Philip Rossdale, he is already online. So Philip, would you be able to go first? Philip Rossdale is the founder of Second Life and the co-founder of High Fidelity. Would you be able to do your presentation first?
Thank you. I certainly can if you like.
Thank you. Help a lot. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. And thank you for having me. It's great to get a chance to talk to the IEEE and also especially to a more technical group that's looking at, I like to call it kind of the plumbing of what we're talking about. So I guess the conversation for today is the metaverse and what is it, I guess, and then are we there yet? This metaverse technology, as Dr. Yuan spoke about in the opening, is certainly a long journey. And in fact, I was delighted to be working first with Dr. Yuan in 2016, six years ago, when we were actively building metaverse systems technology at High Fidelity. So this is indeed a long road. And in fact, 15 years ago, I myself was in the press all over the world talking about avatars in the metaverse. At that time, when Second Life first became well known, there were about 1 million people that were inhabiting the virtual world of Second Life. And 15 years later, there are about the same number of people doing the same things, and participating in a very big world and a big economy, but it's 1 million people and not 1 billion people. And so what happened? And I think that I have a particular perspective that I can lend to you on this, just given the experience that I've had with Second Life as this sort of first prototypical metaverse. So the word metaverse, the first time, like many people, probably many people here, the first time I heard that word was 1992, when my wife, for my birthday, brought me the book Snow Crash, which of course was Neil Stephenson's book, where he first used the term metaverse to refer to a virtual world. But at that time, when she brought me the book, she said, "Oh, this is a book about that thing that you're always talking about and thinking about." And indeed, I had been thinking about the metaverse and thinking about the idea of a virtual world for a lot longer. And in particular, a difference or a contribution that I make to the overall ecosystem here with the metaverse is my own kind of background and why I got to it, which is a little different. I think at the application layer, when people think about metaverse today, they think about things like video games coming together somehow. They think about making money. Maybe they think about socializing with people. But, my background was actually a little different. It was a background steeped in dreaming about simulation. I was, when I first got involved with computers, which is before the internet, but while good personal computers were available, a lot of my early programming work as a kid was a fascination with how to simulate the laws of physics somehow in a computer. And then I had a dream that we could connect a lot of computers together and simulate a really big virtual world, like Dr. Yuan mentioned, simulate the laws of physics, the particles, if you will, in some way. And so the dream that I had was very much of simulating a very large world using computers and then going into it and seeing what things would come of that as people were able to immerse themselves in a world that had this kind of consistent laws of physics and try to create things and build things. So this idea of building together a new universe of a sort was at the core of what interested me, and therefore at the core of what happened with Second Life. I think today when people talk about the metaverse, they're talking about really two separable things that maybe at the more practical level. One is moving the internet. People often talk about the internet becoming the metaverse. And I think when they say that, they're talking about these two ideas. One is going from two-dimensional representations of things, as we have almost entirely on the internet and with our apps today, to 3D representations. A lot of things do make more sense in 3D. I can leave a longer talk about that aside. So this transformation from 2D to 3D is one thing that I think people think about when they're talking about the metaverse. The second thing, though, which is the more important and interesting thing, is the idea of the internet going from being a single player or a very lonely experience to being a live experience where there are other people. When you're on a website, there are other people there with you at the same time, but you can't see them or hear them. I think the biggest and most important opportunity and risk of the metaverse is allowing people to see and hear each other while they're kind of on the internet, if you will. So I think that's the most important thing we have to think about as what we're trying to do here. And before I talk about like the problems and where I think we are on this long journey, some reasons for hope. First, as many people here, I'm sure, remember, the initial kind of excitement of the internet really kind of had at least two big components. One was broadcasting, which is what the early web certainly was. It was the most practical thing we could do with the internet, was just broadcast information to people via websites. But there has always been, and this was true even before the internet itself, there's always been online efforts to bring people together online. And in that kind of Web 1 timeframe, I think there were many, many things created that were very beautiful examples of prototypically starting to kind of bring people together online, let people, say, who don't know each other, for example, have contact with each other. In the last 10 years, we've been in what, in my opinion, is a kind of a weird stage where social media has kind of done the opposite. It's not brought people together. It's separated them from each other. It's isolated them. It's polarized them. It's harmed them. And I think that's very unfortunate and a bit of an artifact. Like we have a weird last 10 years that has happened that I think we can get by. And I like to remind everybody that, before that, the internet was very much about bringing people together. Second Life has demonstrated that you can bring people together in a virtual world and allow them to have a very positive, growing, educational, life-affirming experience in which they do make close contact with other people. And so this idea of just being able to bring people together is something that has certainly happened online some, and that we can come back to really making happen in a positive way on the metaverse. Another whole category for hope in the metaverse as we build, again, as Dr. Yuan said, as we build this kind of I think he was talking about plowing and harvesting at the same time as we do early things with metaverse technology. I think a first category that is a huge opportunity for hope is education. If we can educate people in an entirely new way where kids and teachers, for example, can come together with no regard for their geographic location, we definitely have an enormous kind of a positive impact. But are we there yet? Let me go through kind of some of the points there. And the simple answer is we're not there yet. We're not into any kind of wide metaverse use. Even our best VR headsets that are out there today have failed to gain very much actual usage traction yet. Giving these things away doesn't even really help. There's just a there's a reason we're not all seeing kind of the aggregate report on concurrency on things like the Oculus Quest, is because it's just not there yet. The VR headsets have been much harder, much slower to take up than we thought. A second one has just been COVID. COVID really demonstrated the challenges of socializing online. I don't know how many people here remember like trying to use Zoom to have happy hour with your friends in the very beginning of COVID. It didn't work. You stopped doing it after a couple of times. It demonstrates that communication online is hard, perhaps harder than we thought. And there's a lot of failed startups that have tried to, say, displace Zoom in these last 3 years, and they haven't been successful doing it. A third observation around the numbers is the only real metaverse numbers that we have today are dominated by experiences being used only by kids in a very specific way. So Roblox, Minecraft, and Fortnite make up most of the usage we're looking at. In fact, I would argue, from my own experience, that Second Life is probably still, with about 1 million people using it, is probably still one of the very largest experiences for people that are, say, over the age of 14 years old. So I think it's sobering to consider that we haven't yet gotten adults into these experiences, mostly kids. Looking at the VR hardware in more detail, kind of talking about the specifics. I think all of us here have tried VR hardware, and so you probably could easily throw out the simple things that are problematic with these devices. They're too heavy, so we can't keep them on for long enough to, for example, have a business meeting. You can't type or take notes while you're wearing a VR headset. You can't use your smartphone. These are major issues. You can't really have a meeting, or most meetings, or school, for example, if you can't type or take notes. But I think the most subtle problem and the most damaging problem with VR headsets is that they're divisive and not inclusive. The willingness to put on a VR headset is proportional to your willingness to be blindfolded in a room that may contain other people. And what that means is that we're all uncomfortable putting these things on. Nobody wants to be blindfolded in front of strangers, but some of us are much more uncomfortable than others. And so, unfortunately, the VR device in its current form makes it very difficult for people to, it makes it difficult for everyone to move together into this space. And for example, with Second Life, the equality and inclusion amongst different groups of people is very, very high. And I think we have to have exactly the same thing happening for us to truly kind of move into a metaverse. AR devices are even more problematic because they're, as we know, a harder technology problem. They have to be smaller and lighter. They have to be see-through in both directions. And AR devices can't scan your face or your body very easily because they're, they're glasses you're moving around in the real world with. And therefore, I think real metaverse interactions are difficult and are going to be longer to come. Some of the problems that we need to solve to make this all work on the software side as opposed to the hardware side. Let me jump to that. The most important one, and it's what I touched on earlier about kids versus adults, is that adults are as yet overall unwilling to engage socially as avatars, no matter what the use case is, whether it's work or socialization or going to a live event. People broadly, and I would say I have more experience in this, more negative experience in this than most people are unwilling to put on an avatar and then interact with others. The reason for this is the lack of sufficient nonverbal communication. Even with perfect audio, which is spatial audio, which is what we work on at High Fidelity, the lack of nonverbal information is a complete blocker. You might ask yourself, for example, as a member of the audience today, would you attend a meeting with your boss as an avatar where you couldn't see her facial expressions or her body language while you were speaking? It's a very difficult thing that most people would be unwilling to do. Things like leaning forward and back that we can't yet detect with VR devices, as opposed to, say, walking forward or back. How we turn our shoulders when we're communicating. These are incredibly important and nuanced elements of body language and nonverbal communication that we absolutely need. And until we can get to that, I believe that most grown-ups are not going to be willing to use virtual world technology, not yet. A second critical technology problem is scale. And there are some companies that are doing amazing experimental work in this. I would highlight Improbable as one of those. But most human experiences that we would seek to have in the metaverse require having a lot of people in the same place at the same time. Consider a freshman college class, consider a company all-hands meeting, a political rally, a live music event. These are all experiences where we need to have a lot of people in the same place. And no general purpose technology is yet out there and available to us right now that can have even, say, 100 detailed avatars in the same place. And of course, detail matters because, as I said before, we have to have sufficiently detailed avatars that we're comfortable using them to communicate. So those are three specific things that need to be solved on the software side for us to move into the metaverse. A little bit about economics, which of course is a special background of mine, because Second Life has had from the very beginning a kind of proto digital currency that has been very interesting to compare to the more recent work that's been done in blockchain and the like. Second Life, amongst the million or so people that use it, has a very large and successful economy. About $650 million a year in transactions between individuals and avatars happen in Second Life. So it's a significant economy, and it's taught us a lot. So to enable the kind of economy that we're all talking about driving the metaverse, we need three things that are very important in the economic subsystems, and they don't exist yet. The first is very low fees to enable circular trading amongst creators. So one of the things that drove Second Life's economy critically was the fact that the early creators of things like clothing and furniture for avatars were able to buy and sell their own goods from each other. You can't do that if there are high fees. Of course, you can imagine that if creators engaged in, every other day buying things from each other, and there was a, say, 45% fee on those digital assets, they would run out of money very quickly. And so low fees that enable circular trading in an ecosystem are required to enable the kind of growth that'll start the metaverse. The second is a stable price. If you use a currency to enable trade rather than enabling the store of value, the currency has to remain relatively constant in its price. This was something that we achieved in Second Life through a very unique semi-algorithmic strategy of increasing the amount of currency in circulation as the economy grew. By comparison, the blockchain economies we have today don't do that. And so as a result, their tokens are not useful yet as a currency. They're useful as a store of value. So getting to a stable price is critical. A third thing which I've written a lot about and is very important is that the metaverse economy, to provide a vibrant and growing economy for a lot of people, has to have built-in approaches that address this wealth inequality risk. We've begun to see this in cryptocurrencies, but basically in closed trading systems with free markets, you tend to have kind of one winner like a poker game. So the economic system for the metaverse has to have these three features, and we don't have it yet. As we fix all these things, and I'm sure the people in this room would agree we're going to, as we fix all these things, what could still go terribly wrong, looking back on these last 20 years? One thing I think that could go really wrong in the metaverse is personalized ads. It may be a bit contentious, but I actually think that personalized ad technology needs to be made illegal. And it certainly needs to not happen in the metaverse. We have negative impact that we've seen with personalized advertising over the last decade in social media. If you bring personalized advertising, targeted or surveillance-based advertising, in which you know who the individual is you're advertising to, we run into a couple of enormous risks and dangers if we bring that into the metaverse. The first one is that in a metaverse environment, you simply aren't going to know where the ads are. There's an unfair element to that. In the real world and even on the internet, we as participants know where those ads are. They're in rectangles. We can avoid them. We can look at our friend rather than looking up at the walls of Times Square. In the metaverse, that's not going to be true. The advertisements are going to be people that are doing something intended to, convince you or, sell you something. You're not going to know who they are. And so there's an advantage to the advertiser that we simply can't create. The most dangerous thing, though, with metaverse technology and VR technology is that the enhanced interface technology that we need to enable more immersive experiences also gives a very, very dangerous amount of information about the wearer to the, potentially the advertiser. That information includes a biometric. I can know within a few seconds if you're moving with the help of an AI system. I can know who you are again. I can violate your privacy basically by knowing from your body language who you are. A second one is I can use that movement, sound, potentially gaze information from your eyes to know things about you, such as medical conditions that are simply far beyond the realm of any kind of reasonable social contract or privacy norms. So we have to not use that information. And I think personalized ads are the case where we'll want to. And so as an industry, we're going to have to make a decision not to do that. I think there are the other area for big risk in metaverse is AI. If we use AI to create non-player characters that are taking us away from each other, we have this risk that we can move the attention of human beings basically away from other human beings, which, as I said, I believe is the real opportunity for the metaverse, and instead toward AI, friends or bots of some kind. And that, again, as we in a manner similar to that last decade of social media, has this risk that will move us away from each other. The metaverse, to be an opportunity for all of us and a positive world-changing thing, needs to be a lean forward experience where we engage with other people, where we engage with new challenges, find ways to create new projects with each other, find new ways to communicate and work together. And as I've hopefully touched on in this talk, we certainly can do it. The roadmap for our work is straightforward, and we're going to continue to refine it in groups like these. But we have to focus that effort on bringing us all together, bringing us into a technology-mediated space in which we are likely and able to communicate with each other in the positive, intimate, respectful way that we can in the real world. I think that is a worthy journey to continue on, and I really appreciate having the time to talk to everybody today, and I look forward to the rest of this event. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So our next speaker is Roberto Sarraco. He is a co-chair of IEEE Digital Reality Initiative. He will be talking about the digital twin. Jim, could you make me the presenter? Give me 1 second. I need to share my screen here. Sorry, Jane, could you make me the presenter? I could not share my screen here. Or you want to share your screen? So while we are solving these technical issues, I'd like to mention that we will have two panels after all the keynotes. One is to address the persistence of the metaverse, and the other one is to address the centralized metaverse versus decentralized metaverse. So in my humble opinion, I think these two discussions could be providing some fundamental points for the development and the deployment of the metaverse. So I'm excited about that. Okay, so let me share my screen for Roberto Sarraco's talk. So
morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. I'm glad to have this opportunity of sharing with you some of the thoughts that have been emerging in the work we're doing in the IEEE Digital Reality Initiatives, specifically the part that relates to digital twins that can foster and are already fostering in a way the industrial metaverse. In my talk, I'll be addressing two basic areas. One is a digital twin as such as building blocks of the metaverse, and the other one is operating the metaverse using digital twin. So in a nutshell, I started by focusing on digital twin as a component of the digital transformation. Then I go on talking about personal digital twin. Then we look at how to have digital twin bridging our space to the metaverse. And I conclude with some example of operating in the metaverse. So let's start with the digital transformation first. Now, as you can see in the picture, digital transformation is about connecting together atoms and bits. And we're using sensors to convert atoms into bits, to mirror them into bits, and we're using actuators to move bits of the digital space into atoms. Now, there are several different definitions of the metaverse. The one that we have adopted in our initiative is that the metaverse is actually the convergence of the digital space with the physical space. And the important thing is the fact that from a perception point of view, which is from our perception as human beings, we are no longer going to see that much difference between the physical and the digital space. We are living in a space that is a sum, the overlapping of the two of them. And of course, this is being done using a massive amount of data, so data that can be harvested and stored. But then the point is to make sense of this data and to act on it. Now, there are many different approaches in different sectors to digital transformation. Here you see as an example in the picture the digital transformation in healthcare. And you can see in the lower part at slide number 8, the creation of digital twins. So digital twins are really an essential component in this digital transformation. Now what we're seeing today is that there's a different penetration in different sectors. Like in entertainment, they are very much, the digital transformation is very much advanced. In other areas like healthcare is starting, but is actually moving forward very, very rapidly. However, independent of the sector, what they all have in common, that they are looking at the digital transformation to lower the cost, increase efficiency, and also they are seeing it as a potential for disruption that is opening up the market to the new business model. Now, let's focus on digital twin and their role in this digital transformation. You see the red arrow there on the previous picture. When basically the digital twin are the entities that is operating in the cyberspace, it's used to mirror, to model, and also to connect and understand what is going on. So digital twin are really a very important, a key component in the digital transformation. And one of the basic important things is the fact that digital twins are in sync with the physical space. How is this possible? Well, this is possible because the physical space is continuously providing by a sense of data information about their current status. And the digital twin is absorbing this kind of thing, update the model of the actual situation of the physical entity, and then interact with the physical entity, providing guidance and something like that. So it's acting on the physical space. Now, if we look inside the concept of the digital twin, we will readily identify three main components, which is the digital model, mirroring the car, as in the picture here. You have a model of the car. Then you've got the digital shadow that is basically representing the car as it is, the one on the right-hand side. Okay, it's no longer a model, it's an actual car that is driving at a certain speed, using a certain amount of fuel, and so on. So this is the digital shadow. And then you've got digital thread, which is basically the recording of the evolution of that particular object over time. All these three factors, all these three components make up the digital twin. Now, digital twin have been used for at least 20 years now, and they are rapidly evolving because as they get more and more used in different fields, each field is slightly adapting them to their particular needs. But overall, we can say that the evolution is from the stage one, where they have just a model, a static model of physical version, to the second stage, where they are really a digital version of the physical version that can simulate whatever happens in the physical version, to the third stage, where we're basically today, where you have a continuous flow of data between the digital version and the physical version, and they are interacting one with the other. You have this famous digital shadow. Now we're moving into the fourth stage, where there's an overlapping of the two. And some of the features that we are perceiving from using an object is actually a feature that may be provided by the digital twin from the digital space. And in the fifth stage, we will see digital twin becoming more and more autonomous and interacting, moving into this cyberspace that we are starting to call the metaverse. You see, these two joining physical and digital are actually comprising the metaverse. Now, let me give you some example of use so that we can understand much better what we're talking about. Here you see in this picture, there's a person using a sort of simulator. This simulator has been created by Mevea, a Finnish company, that based on the specification provided by the customer, I want to have a backhoe and I want to use it in this space in my city. Okay, they are developing a digital twin of that backhoe. The backhoe is still not there. You only have the digital model. And they also make sure to develop a digital twin representing the overall environment where that backhoe is going to operate. Then they call in the customer and say, okay, try to operate your backhoe and see how it works. And the customer will be satisfied, will not be satisfied, will revise the specification and so on, to the point that they say, yes, this is really what I want. At that point, Mevea is going to build the physical backhoe and deliver the physical backhoe. But in the meantime, the customer has gone back home with the digital version of the backhoe, and he's using that digital version to train his people that will be using then the physical backhoe. And once the physical backhoe is back to the place where it's going to be used, it is connected through the digital shadow to the digital twin in the Mevea offices. And the Mevea can follow up what's going on, can provide proactive maintenance, can finely tune the performances, and can understand how the user is really using things so that it can be made better and better. So you see, this is a concrete application of the digital twin. But digital twin can also be used as an example by Singapore. Singapore, starting on January 1st, 2019, has got a digital twin of their city. And they are using this digital twin to simulate what's going on in the city, to monitor the city, and also to simulate what might happen if something occurs in the city, like setting up a new mall. And they're going to interact with the digital twin of this new mall yet to be developed to see what kind of impact it's going to have on traffic, as an example. And then they're using the digital twin of the mall once it has been developed, incorporating into the digital twin of Singapore so that they have a clear idea of what's going on at any time in any part of the city. Another example is the use of digital twin in healthcare. General Electric is being one of the pioneers in this area, but also Philips is following up. Well, they use digital twin for hospital ward management. They are using for the equipment management. You see there's an MRI equipment, and the MRI equipment as a digital twin. Digital twin are being used by surgeon assistant during surgery, and they are also being used for training future doctors and so on. Now, all of these is taking us to the fact that if we can use a digital twin to model an object, an entity, why couldn't we think about using a digital twin to model a person, okay, a physical person you see in the image? Well, actually, the European Commission is very keen on doing this kind of thing, and they actually decided to call this personal digital twin. Whilst on the first idea, you might have said, why not call it a personal digital twin? Well, they moved into a personal digital twin because they said, yes, it's going to be the digital twin of that person, but it is important, at least in Europe, that that person has a full control of that digital twin, is its own digital twin. So they decided to call it a personal digital twin. And they launched a significant amount of projects in developing the regulatory and legal framework to support this kind of thing. Now, what can you use a personal digital twin for? Well, you can mirror a specific subset of characteristics of a person. So you don't need to mirror the complete person, okay? You may want to mirror just some physical aspect, like an organ, to understand how to replace, to make a transplant. You can use it for behavioral mirroring and even for cognitive mirroring. Actually, in the Digital Reality Initiative, we are pushing very hard on this because we feel that having a digital twin taking care of the cognitive mirroring can help IEEE in delivering much better services, much better cognitive services to our members and companies alike. Now, personal digital twins are already being used. They are already being used in retail, as an example. You see in the image, one is the person, the other one is the mirror image of that person. And you step inside a shop and you do your shopping, but you can also do the same thing staying home and walking the metaverse to that shopping place. And the shop place, the store, knows about you because they have all your digital twin that can interact with them, and your digital twin can pick up the exact size of that t-shirt that you're looking for and make sure that it really does. And then it shows it to you, showing how you look like with that t-shirt on your screen. It can be, they are used by cities, I already mentioned in Singapore, and by organization. Healthcare organizations are starting to use personal digital twin to understand, as an example, the evolution of epidemics. And a digital twin, once you have a personal digital twin, you can have your personal digital twin stepping into the cyberspace, becoming part of the metaverse, acting as an avatar. Now, how can you use digital twin and personal digital twin to create this bridge to the metaverse? Well, here I try to sketch out a comparison between the ISO model, the layer model, and the metaverse layers. And you see, in the metaverse, you're going to start with the device, communication cloud, virtual cloud, and then you enter into these metaverse layers that are comprising data spaces, digital twins, and your perception. So you are perceiving what's going on, you're living in the metaverse through the digital twin that in turn are using the data spaces that are hosted by virtual cloud, that are sustained by cloud, and so on. Now, how can you imagine to operate in this industrial metaverse that can be created using the stuff that I mentioned before? Well, here you have an image from Reply, a company in Italy, which is actually a worldwide company, is one of the largest system integrator around, in Europe at least, and they call this the cave. And basically what they are doing, they are providing a setting where you can step in physically or virtually and interact with other things that are in the metaverse. So the point is to interface the physical and the digital space. Once you're there, you're basically provided through your digital twin a customized lens, which means you are going to see something because you can understand something because it matters to you to see that something. And you can roam the digital space. And it can morph the scale, the physical and the digital, into one single metaverse, so that you no longer perceive the difference between what is physical and what is remote. Now, you step in and you see that there's an ambient recreation. So if you want to be in a hangar where you can see an engine of an airplane, you are going to perceive you be in a hangar. You can be in a warehouse, you can be in a shopping mall, whatever, okay? So there's this ambient recreation. And then there are digital twins of the equipment. So you don't need to have the equipment, the real equipment. You just need to have the digital equipment and you interact with that. And this is allowing both local in the cave manipulation of things, as well as collaborative working. People from abroad, from far away, can interact with that. How is this implemented? Well, you have basically a sort of a cinema setting with the projectors that are projecting all around, so that you have the feeling of being inside a space, and there are sensors that are tracking your position, cameras tracking your position, and you can use devices like iPads or holodecks, or you can use these goggles. Okay, you put there Oculus Rift or the others, and really interact with the world. You feel like you are part of this world. Okay, and the software setup is such that is using digital twins of the various pieces and using data spaces so that the different parties can coordinate and collaborate through data spaces that are then accessed by digital twins. Finally, we have seen this kind of application in real life. So the cave of reply is actually available in MADE in Milan and SIM in Turin, that are two spaces used by industry, by hundreds of industry, to collaborate on the development of innovative projects, so that you don't need to really have the actual equipment. You can just use the idea of the equipment, the specification of the equipment through the digital twin, and see how other companies can complement this kind of thing. And it is being used, and you see here the image, the actual image, at the Milan Oncological Hospital to provide patients that are immobilized in a bed for any reason, okay, to move around in a shop, in the shop of the hospital, and to pick up stuff. And when they are picking up this stuff in the metaverse, actually they activate a command that result in some people bringing you the stuff that you have picked up. So this is a practical example of using the metaverse and really using it, okay, by people and feeling like you're part of that. So with that, I'm done. And please get in touch with me if you want to know more, if you want to discuss with me. You have my email there, you have my LinkedIn, and I'll be very much pleased to interchange ideas with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So next, we will be having a panel. Let me find the panel agenda. So we'll be having a panel on the topic persistent computing, enabling the persistence of the metaverse. So I will be moderating the panel. Let me introduce our panelists, our distinguished panelists. We have Philip Rossdale, who is the founder of Second Life and the co-founder of High Fidelity. We have Thomas Coughlin. He is the president of Coughlin Associates, and he is also the 2023 IEEE President-elect candidate. And I have to mention other candidates, Mikey Lukin, Kazuhiro Kosoji, and Catherine Kramer, to follow the comply with the IEEE policy. And you can find other candidates' information through the link on our conference website. And we have Michelle Zhou, who is the co-founder and the CEO of Juji, a California-based company working on chatbots, AI-enabled chatbots. She is also a member at large of the ASM Council. And we have Neil Trevitt. He is the chair of Metaverse Standards Forum and the president of Kronos Group and the VP of Developer Ecosystems of NVIDIA. So myself and my role for this session is mainly the president-elect of the IEEE Standards Association. So let me start with some background introduction. As we, give me 1 second. Okay, so after Metaverse became a buzzword last year, I asked myself, excuse me, what's the most important difference between a Metaverse and a virtual world experience in general? So the answer I got is persistence. Most of the virtual worlds so far, including those in 3D games, are not persistent, since they will be reset every time you log in. However, In an impersistent virtual world, users will not be able to create any meaningful content, and the social interactions and experiences in it will be very limited. So after realizing the importance of persistence, I coined the term persistent computing to refer to technologies needed to design, build, operate, and upgrade persistent virtual worlds, including but not limited to computation, storage, communications, data, intelligence, and other enabling technologies. So it's my great honor to moderate this panel and discuss with our distinguished panelists how to design, build, and operate a persistent virtual world and how to upgrade it towards larger scale and finer grained without breaking the persistence. So my first question is for Philip. You are the founder of Second Life, which is widely recognized as the first embodiment of Metaverse. So as a virtual world, Second Life has been persistent since its initial release in 2003. I guess there must be many lessons learned and recommended practices, especially from the perspective of not only maintaining but also upgrading such a large-scale virtual world by adding new features. So could you share with us some of your lessons learned or recommended practices?
Sure, and you're right, because Second Life is so sensitive. Well, because so much of it is based on the existence of an economy, the issue of upgrading it and therefore changing the nature of the virtual items inside it is a really big deal. One of the things we learned, I think, much more so than when I started, over these last 20 years, is that, as you say, upgrading a persistent world, particularly one in which there's economic value and intellectual property value attached to the things people are making, is very difficult, close to impossible. It's an interesting problem. I think one of the metaverse design goals that we'll all have is how to modularize the components of a virtual world so that they can be isolated from change when they're associated with valued work that people have done. I must admit I didn't think about that as much at the beginning, and I was struck by the complexity of it. As time has gone by in Second Life, people have used bugs, for example, that existed in the system to create pieces of content on which large economies are now based. So we can't fix those bugs because they're critically enabling somebody else's experience. And so that's one thing that I would throw out that I think suggests that it's a difficult challenge. But obviously, as you're saying about persistence, it's a challenge worth pursuing. We've got to have the world have some stable structure to it so that when we come back, we see the same thing we saw yesterday. So it's a big challenge.
Thank you. So next, I'd like to ask Tom. Tom works on digital storage and memory and their applications. When we talk about the technologies behind the persistent computing or persistent virtual worlds, storage is probably the first one that you'll think of. So could you share with us your thoughts about the metaverse from the storage perspective?
So when we think of storage, we think of something that persists, basically, the data is there. And digital storage and also memory too play a critical role in enabling persistent virtual experiences. Digital memory is where data being processed is kept, and the storage is where the resulting digital world will be stored. Storing and accessing this ongoing collection of digital data is what enables the impression of a persistent digital world. Now, in addition to this infrastructure element, a lot of it which is happening at big data centers in the cloud, in digital storage and memory and the creation of apparent persistence in the metaverse, there's another important element in persistence in the ability of individuals to remain connected with this virtual world. And with many of the audio video devices currently used for this access run on batteries or otherwise have constrained power, low power capabilities are going to be important. And there's a very important move from the use of volatile to non-volatile memory in embedded devices ongoing in the major semiconductor foundries today that will enable responsive power saving modes that could help with this sense of persistence using power constrained devices. Now, in addition to storage of the metaverse in the infrastructure and in the individual access devices, there's a more expansive question about persistence in the metaverse, which I think Philip Rosedale just touched upon. and that relates to the storage management that are going to underlie the metaverse. In particular, digital assets have a history of rapid technical obsolescence, and older unsupported code creates a greater exposure for malware. We need to consider what preservation and archive practices are going to be needed, and what are the risks and opportunities in creating this greater vision of metaverse persistence. Thanks.
Thank you, Tom. And then let me ask Michelle. You are in the field of human-centered AI, an interdisciplinary area that intersects AI and human-computer interaction. And your company is powering cognitive artificial intelligence assistants in the form of chatbots, which, according to my understanding, will be the cause of digital humans, an important component of metaverse. So my question is, if your chatbots are non-player characters living in a persistent virtual world, would the persistence of the outside world make any difference to AI in the chatbots? For example, a different training model, or maybe any new features that the chatbots may not be able to provide in an impersistent virtual world?
Thank you for asking this question, Yu. So actually, your question is very interesting. It's really got me thinking about from multiple aspects. And my background is very different from other panelists because I'm also coming from the human-computer interaction, really centered on the human side of it. So just actually asking me a question before I answer your question is, what to be persisted, right? So thinking about the parallel world in our real world, so what we really want to persist it is memory, right? Because you don't want to talk to a person who said, okay, I don't remember who you are. and I don't remember what we have said last time. So you wanted to actually preserve the memory of the people who are around you and yourself as well, right? Second, I was thinking about it is because in our cognitive AI, one of the very important attributes we want to power AI is with what we call it, the ability to be able to read people. So it's about this infer people's personality, psychographic characteristics. So when think about it is in the real world, what you want to persist it is a person's character, right? Characters, maybe characteristics. Otherwise, we would call this person multiple personality disorder because you want the person to be persistent on their behavior, on their interaction with other people. And the third one, I think is also important, relationships. That's why you want to, at least most of us want to have lasting marriage, have a great relationships with our colleagues, with our children, and with our friends, right? So then now I'm trying to mirror back to the virtual reality in the metaverse world. First of all, do we want to persist our memory? Sounds like everybody agrees to it, right? And I'm wondering, because it's a virtual world, we are the humans who are creating the world. Maybe we have the rights, we have the power to make things forgetful. For example, in the real world, you don't really have that power, right? You have a horrible memory, you carry that throughout your life. In the one, so I'm kind of like almost like a playing devil's advocate for what things you don't want to preserve and you don't want to persist it if you could do that in the virtual world. So in the metaverse, let's talk about second characteristics, characters, right? So characters, as I said, in the real world, you want to preserve that. Otherwise, people will view you as some kind of a personality disorder. But in the real world, hey, I can afford to be multiple personalities. I can, but that kind of personalities needs to be persisted through the context, right? So for example, in one part of the world, I want to be an artist. I wanted to show off my creative side of it. But in another maybe sub world, like the subreddit, right? The sub metaverse, I want to be a helper. I want to be the Mother Teresa type of a personality. Maybe I can do that. And the third, the relationships. So I think these things sounds like we wanted to be persisted in the real world, right? Sorry, in the metaverse and the real world, because you want to have the relationship with your, maybe digital twins, people called about that, and with your AI companion over there. So given this one, I don't really see the challenges from technical side different from the real world, creating AI assistants. But I do see tremendous amount of challenges from the ethical and from actually, I would say ethical, maybe from a business and from a humanity point of view. So that's why I'm kind of raising this question: what do you want to persist, and what do people want to persist in the real world? Because in the real world versus in the metaverse, right? Because it's a very different world. If you want to create a world that's so powerful and you can really do everything, you are the king or you're the queen, or maybe you are the god of the world, you probably don't want to follow exactly what's in the real world, right? So that's why I would love to hear other panelists' comments as well, and just kind of throughout, because I saw this is a very interesting, provoking kind of a discussion in terms of, so what the metaverse should really be like? What do people want to be persistent in that world? Because persistence does come with a price as well, and different types of price, right? Not just about computational price, also price about mental burdens and physical burdens. So I'm just wondering, I'm going to stop here. I'm babbling a bit and hear what other what folks would say.
Thank you. I do say Tom has some comments. So Tom, would you?
Oh, I was just thinking while you're talking about that, Michelle, the metaverse, if it's going to be a real reflection of who we are, right, as people, it's probably going to be an awful lot of different things. Some people use the metaverse to augment their own capabilities in some way, creative way. Some people are going to use it for pure escape, to entertain themselves, and they may not want to persist.
Exactly. That's what.
So
that's what.
I think it's going to vary an awful lot. That's my own impression of how people would use it, just because of the way people are.
Yeah. I heard when the Second Life started, I even remember there was a guy, because I went to see the demo somewhere. It was really cool, especially thinking about this about many years ago. So one guy said it is in the real life, he's a husband. He's a father of two, right? And he is, I remember it's a broker somewhere, maybe real estate broker. But in the virtual world, in Second Life, that's why I call the Second Life, he's a very powerful, I remember some kind of business executive. He has multiple wives over there. This is something like you said, a fantasy life, right? He doesn't want to carry the same two kids with one wife. He has to work hard in the real world into the escape. So that's why I said it is, what do you want to persist? It's very interesting to think about. As I said, I thank you who came up with this topic. And another one, it is like I talk about the mental, like for example, PTSD, right? The reason people have PTSD is because of horrible memories. And if you can erase that, great. I'm not sure. Maybe I've been this controversial as well. Some people say that that's part of life. I don't want to erase that. But other people who had that, who have had the PTSD, would say otherwise.
Well, that's great. I can't keep myself from saying something about that. I think, to me, I think the most important value of metaverse is to provide a possibility that you can live a different life. Life is elsewhere, or life in the reality could be boring, but you can live a different life or multiple lives in the metaverse. That's why I really love the name Second Life. I think that's exactly to the point. And so to me, I think as long as we can try to use some like standards or policies to reduce the negative perspectives of metaverse experiences, metaverse will be truly a great thing for all the human beings, in terms of we can have much better life experiences and different lives. So that's one of my own motivations behind why I have been working on in this area for many years. So let me ask the next question for Neil. So Neil has been leading the Kronos group to develop standards for 3D and XR graphics. Now you are also leading the Metaverse Standards Forum, which is young but already very influential in the metaverse industry. So could you share with us your thoughts about the persistence of a virtual world from the modeling and the rendering perspective, especially considering that a virtual world may need to be upgraded to finer graded and while keeping the persistence. So would you expect some standards to address such kind of scalability?
Yeah, it's a great question, and yeah, thank you for bringing up this whole topic. Persistence is going to be a vital part of what most people think of as the metaverse, and it's fascinating to hear, Philip's experience with Second Life and kind of the hidden complexity of actually managing this kind of thing in practice. We've been coming at this kind of problem. We've obviously just started, but from the asset interoperability point of view, I think there are use cases where you want the attributes of an asset to be persistent, and you quickly run into the even more complexity than what Philip was talking about, because you want that persistence and interoperability to apply across multiple spaces in the metaverse. So, if someone upgrades their avatar outfit in Second Life, are they going to be able to go into Fortnite and enjoy the same benefits for their avatar in some way there, or across other spaces on in the metaverse? I think a lot of people are kind of hoping and expecting that. It kind of comes to Michelle's point, or are we going to be a different person in every different space, and we can't take anything across the different spaces in the metaverse? I think that would be below some people's hopes and expectations. But of course, it brings up another whole layer of challenges which are not addressed at all. I think we can help start this discussion maybe by focusing on asset interoperability rather than runtime interoperability. Hooking together different runtimes is going to be really hard, but it's not completely impossible to imagine. We could have standardized asset formats that the different spaces and experiences on the metaverse voluntarily choose to support. So you may be able to upgrade an asset in some way in one space and go to another space that advertises and supports that upgrade in another way in their space. So it's an interesting challenge, and the other big thing brings up is kind of came up earlier. It means you need to be decentralized. If you're going to be able to go between spaces, then you can see that maybe it's not one space that gets to store the persistent data about that asset. It needs to be decentralized and accessible to multiple spaces in some way. So that's another whole layer of technical challenge. And then finally, you need to interface. You need some kind of interoperability between business models, which may be the hardest of all. If someone pays in one space and then takes that upgraded asset into another space, how does payment flow between those two spaces in some way? So there's a lot of interesting discussion and challenges to be sorted out here.
Thank you. I'd like to add that you mentioned bringing assets from one virtual world to another. In my opinion, I think that is actually a complicated case, because many people may feel that it's definitely a good thing to allow users to bring their virtual assets between different virtual worlds. But I would like to add that the reality is that this may be harmful in terms of your experience. For example, two games I typically play. One is Call of Duty, the other one is PUBG. So in Call of Duty, every sniper gun is naturally with a scope. So you don't have to get a scope to use that to snipe other guys. But in PUBG Mobile, you have to run for airdrop to get a scope for your snapgun, which is at the beginning without scope, which means it's useless. So if you allow another user to bring a sniper gun from Call of Duty to PUBG Mobile, then the gaming experience in PUBG Mobile will be ruined, will be destroyed. So I think such kind of things is related to the so-called gaming balance. There are engineers working on that particular topic every day. So that's something makes the situation more complex, I believe.
Yes, but I agree. But of course, so you're going to need add another layer of interoperability, which is gameplay interoperability. And not every asset, of course, would be portable. You'd need to have careful coordination and agreement between the different spaces as to what assets would be appropriate and possible to bring. And maybe avatars and apparel for avatars may be a place to start because that is more universal than objects that are used in gameplay.
That's great. So I see some questions, interesting questions in the chat window from our attendees. The first one I'd like to pick is that Mal Burns asked a question in OpenSim, which is a cousin of Second Life. Multiple simulators are connected together, and most are fully persistent. However, some operators use a system where the simulator shuts down when nobody is using that, then simply reloads for visitors as they come. Still maintain the illusion of a persistent world. Could this become a more common practice, especially when users more frequently host their own assets on private servers? So our panelists who want to take this question? It's about, I think this is also about decentralized ownership and operations of metaverse. Like if some of the metaverse is like hosted by, owned by some users, and but I think that's about load and save. I think that's Tom's area. So about the storage, I had preliminary discussions with other guys before I started the topic of the persistent computing, and naturally, many people think of storage is the first thing they can think of about talking about a persistent world, and they consider that if we even with load and save, as long as you can keep the user experience persistent, it still counts as a persistent virtual world. But that may mean some impact or implications on the storage perspective, especially if we are talking about a very big virtual world, large scale virtual world. So Tom, would you like to share some comments on this?
So part of this gets into who owns the resources, I guess, and if you're using an awful lot, if you're creating something that is very large, there's probably some, it requires an awful lot of processing going on, requires more storage space to keep the results, things of that sort. So there also is maybe an economic model that we need to consider in here, is that if somebody or an entity uses a lot of resources, then they have some responsibility to pay for those resources as well, or at least some sort of mechanism needs developed to be able to support it. Because ultimately, this stuff lives because people can build data centers, they can run those data centers, and to do that, they need to be able to pay for the costs of doing that. So, there needs to be some kind of, ownership or at least responsibility for providing resources that are made. And this also gets into that longer term project, is that if fewer people start to use a resource, what do you do with it? And if you put it into a cold storage and then someone accesses it later on, will it still work? And that maybe gets into some of these standard activities we're talking about. Is there some mechanism for preservation of older digital assets that may mimic, in some regards, the way physical assets can continue to persist? Something may get old, it may get worn out, but on the other hand, you may still have some value left in an asset in the physical world. What is going to be the counterpart in the virtual world? And as we create these, these entities of various sorts, whether it be, a social experience that people go through, that if this becomes a big part of what we are, that is, we're living in a virtual world as well as the physical world, that's part of our history. How do we preserve that history? How do we make that so it's accessible or understandable for people in the future, so they know a bit about who it was that we were? So I think maybe that gets into some of the questions you're getting into there. Is that there's also data management functions, and then related to that also is going to be security functions and things of that sort as well. That have to be a big part of the long-term persistence of the metaverse and what it was and its reflection of who we are as a consequence of that.
Thank you. And another question I found from the chat window is about, okay, that was from Maria De Pana. The question is that I just wondered if we want to bring our social problems and the horrors of humanity to the metaverse. So I think probably Philip is the best person to answer this question. You have been running Second Life for so many years. Did you see some significant social problems or horrors of humanity in Second Life, and how did you address them?
Well, first of all, right, we can either choose to, we can build systems that reinforce our negative tendencies or our positive ones. I'll tell you a story about about Second Life. Second Life, especially in its early couple of years, had a forum just like we have today with Reddit or any other, online forum. So we had a forum that you could use to communicate with other people in Second Life, or you could, of course, go in Second Life and communicate with them. And I noticed a very interesting thing, which was people would get in fights with each other in those forums in exactly the same way they do today in the comments on YouTube or in Twitter or in Reddit. But every time that I saw somebody getting in a fight like that, I would try to go visit them in Second Life face to face as an avatar. So I would go walk up to the person and say, hi, you said this thing in the forum, and I'm curious, how can I help, or what's upsetting you? And in every case, of course, we all know the answer here. In every case, those people immediately became friendlier and worked through their differences when they were face to face. So the sensation of being face to face creates a difference in our behavior. It makes us much more civil naturally. This has been studied a lot, as an aspect of presence. So while that doesn't solve everything, it points to the fact that if we design these worlds correctly, we can create environments in which we come to know each other and resolve our differences and, maybe replay and work through some of these horrors, as the question said. So I think we should bring our whole selves to the virtual world, but we should use the virtual world as a means of resolving, disputes, for example, rather than creating more. And we definitely can, because the more lifelike and face-to-face the experience is, the more respectful and compassionate and positive we can become. Thanks.
Fantastic. Thank you. And then I say another question to Michelle's point. I'm also wondering if toddlers will be able to use Metaverse, and in what way, since Metaverse has a learning curve which adults can manage relatively easily. So I think that's, Michelle, that's a question for you, and you are expert of UI user experience.
Thank you. Actually, I was just reading the questions. There's another guy asked another question. I think his name is Sundar Ali Khawaja. And he also asking the question maybe related to also about the democratization, which is kind of something I'm passionate about, right? So one of my missions right now, I made it, is to democratizing AI, democratizing technology, because we're already facing a digital divide, right? I mean, I'm not sure if you're still in China right now. Thinking about it, if you don't have a cell phone, you don't know how to do online payment. It's a pain in the life, right? It's almost impossible to live. And then now it's AI divide, which means it is only the very powerful companies who can afford to hire talents, then you can have AI. But the normal organizations and typical organizations and human, like individuals, definitely don't have that access. So one of our mission is to democratizing the AI technology, so everyone, literally anyone, could use to create their own version of AI. Similarly here, and in Metaverse, if we are not taking care of this one, we're going to create yet another digital divide, which means it is only people who can code, who understands online worlds, can access, create, and manage, right? Because those people are going to create the worlds that you may not want. So as I think, democratizing the technologies for anyone, everyone, including hopefully toddlers, K to 12 students, to be able to learn, access, eventually create and manage the metaverse would be very, very important. I hope many other organizations can join us in this particular effort of basically democratizing technologies so people can have that access to the technology as well as the world, right?
That's great. Thank you. I also see a question raised by you is what are killer apps of Metaverse besides escaping from our real life? I'll take this first, and we will see what our other panelists will think. So I think, life is elsewhere. To me, that is one of the major demand or needs of human beings. But other than that, I think Metaverse can provide other kinds of opportunities that we never had before, such kind of equity for education. So like in the real life, some children, they may never have a chance to visit like the Forbidden City or the Metropolitan Museum, things like that. But using some educational apps in Metaverse, it's actually trying to make the education opportunities more equal. And so does some healthcare applications such as there's a new term called digital therapy. So using Metaverse for some psychological therapies would be another means that more people can probably afford, especially for those ADHD, whatever, the children who are suffering from those kind of disorders. I think Metaverse may make some significant and positive difference for them. So I'll stop here and say what our other panelists think about this. Tom, Philip, Leo, you want to take this?
I was actually going to kind of build on what Thomas was saying earlier. I think digital twins it is a kind of a killer app, a killer use case for the metaverse. They're linking together the real and virtual worlds is a very powerful thing. You know, some of the and it goes beyond, you know, just controlling factories or controlling your air conditioning. You can actually, if you begin to bring physical simulation into the mix, you know, I've seen applications where you actually train a robot for maybe some kind of industrial application in the metaverse. Everything is being fully simulated. You know, the interactions with objects and its surroundings. You may be using, you know, AI as well, you know, to control the actions of the robot, and then you can actually lift that training out of the virtual world, the metaverse, and drop it into an actual physical robotic device, and you know, it behaves exactly as you've trained it virtually. I think that's a glimpse into, you know, how the real and virtual worlds are going to begin to blend together, you know, in the industrial space in very powerful ways.
So Neil, just filling on that a little bit, is that I think there's very important industrial uses. There's uses in education to get an experience of what something is like. And if you think about it, there's people with physical disabilities for whom having a virtual experience, especially if it also involves telepresence or being able to actually move robotic assemblies and things of that sort, could be very valuable. Imagine somebody who's locked in, essentially, or a paraplegic, You know, it may enable them, but they still have an active mind. It enables them perhaps to be, in some sense or in some way, productive and contributing, or at least being able to live a more full life than what they could otherwise.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great.
I think the learning education, it is a very, I would say, I agree, it's a killer app. Because, for example, I'm thinking about like people have started to do that, right? Like the doctors, maybe they can have the real experience, kind of like simulate the real experience operating on patients, practice on operating on patients. And I think some of them, there's many things. Yeah, I can see that it will be really also. You could, as I said, we said earlier, because in a virtual world, you can pretend to be anyone else, right? And it will be a great experience. I see actually Maria or somebody who's in the audience, seems has a lot of experience with kids. And it would be great to actually almost like a, how do you say this? Kind of like in a simulation, but more real. Teach kids how do you interact with people, right? And you will see if they have a different behavior, how other people will react. But sometimes not everybody really has that mirror, right? So actually virtual world can serve as your mirror to say, if you behave in this way, like for example, on the being angry and being very obnoxious, how would things will happen to you, right? Because in the real world, if it's happened, it's already bad, too bad. It's already damage is already done. But in a real world, in a virtual world, you probably able to practice on how to even interacting with people. And I think Tom mentioned the kind of disability. There's a different types of disability, right? Not just physical, could be psychological as well. So maybe you can use that to as a training, rehab. I think, yeah, I do now. I do see that. Yeah, thank you for actually bringing up.
Yeah, I saw Philip made a comment in the chat window saying that metaverse is more about connecting with people.
Yeah.
So I fully agree with that. Many people are concerned about if metaverse would cause that our people will generally be more separated from each other. But my answer would be, we can look back how many friends averagely we have before the internet era. So the answer is that with those kind of internet and the mobile internet, we are making more friends than we did before. So I assume metaverse will could positively do the same thing. So I think that's something I'd like to echo to Philip's comment in the chat window. We still have a few minutes. I'd like to save that for my favorite question. In my opinion, there are two coolest things in the world that we can do. One is to hack this universe. The other one is to create another universe. So myself, I have no idea how to hack this universe, but I'm extremely interested in creating another universe, which should be indistinguishable from our current universe. To do that, first we need to know how to build a persistent, large-scale, fine-grained, and physically self-consistent virtual world. So I believe the breakthrough in this direction depends on the continuous progress in computation, storage, communications, modeling, rendering, and other technologies. So by doing so, we can start doubting if we are actually currently living in a virtual universe. Some people already say that we are living in a universe, but to me, I think we need more evidence. One evidence is that whether or not we will be able to create another virtual universe on top of this universe. But that's also related to another question I never heard other people talk about, which is about the relationship between virtual reality and AI. So there's some people in the AI discipline, they believe that by simulating human brain down to the very detail, you will be able to get consciousness eventually, or intelligence eventually. But imagine if we are currently living in a virtual world, where is your consciousness? It's not in this universe. It's in another universe. Similar to what when you are playing a video game, your consciousness is never in the head of your avatar in that video game. So which means, to me, I think those 2 points are fundamentally conflicting with each other. Either AI scientists can achieve consciousness or intelligence by simulating human brains down to every cell, or if we are living in a virtual universe, that direction of simulating consciousness by simulating human brains will never succeed. So, I stop here and leave a few minutes for our panelists to share your opinions on this. Maybe Michelle, you are AI scientist. What do you think?
So very interesting. Actually, I got the similar question all the time. It said it is AI doesn't have consciousness, have emotion. How can AI be empathetic, right? So actually, I have a very opposite. Now I have thought about this for a long time now. Actually, I don't want AI to have the consciousness. The reason it is, remember the humans, right? So there is 2 sides of it. So one side of it is for humans. That's what the word of biology we have. It is we have the emotions, right? So because the emotions we express ourselves, we show our empathetic side of it. The beauty of AI it is because it's a synthetic. It's what we humans made them. So what it means it is I could make the AI to demonstrate it, to exhibit certain great things of emotional expressions, but without enduring the emotional burdens of humankind. So I'll give you a very quick example of that. So let's say in a call center, suicide call center, right? I remember there is a study showing that the call center staff members are also consistently under emotional pressure because they have to deal with people who want to commit suicide, right? So they heard their stories, that's the emotional burdens on humans. That's what we're made of. But thinking about if you have an AI assistant who can help the call center staffs, let the AI to carry all the burdens, but it's still showing that empathetic, responsible side of it. How great it is. We humans can't do that because the emotions is ingrained in our brain, in our cell. Why would we want to do that to the machines? Because they can exhibit what I call it is actually AI could exhibit the empathy side of it, but without actually feeling anything. That's just the behavior and the actually the makeup doesn't need to be connected. So that's actually my take on it is we want AI to be empathetic, to express a certain type of emotions, social emotional characteristics. I call the word exhibit, right? So they can better connect with humans, but themselves doesn't need to be made have the same structure as the humans. Actually, I don't want them to have the same structure as the humans. So they don't carry the burdens that we carry.
Thank you. I think we are running out our time. So any other panelists want to say some words before we conclude this panel? Hearing none, thank you so much. Thank you so much. I enjoyed this panel. So very, very happy to be with you. So let me switch to our main agenda and let our next panel begins. Ramesh Ramadas, who is the moderator of the next panel, Centralized Metaverse versus Decentralized Metaverse. So Ramesh, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Sounds like you guys had pretty interesting, thoughtful discussions. Let's see how our panel goes. We'll try to make it exciting. So we have a panel of about 4 speakers or panelists. The title is Centralized Metaverse versus Decentralized Metaverse, right? And then why, where, and how. My name is Ramesh Ramadas. I serve as co-chair of the IEEE Blockchain Initiative. You can see the logo in the background. So if you just type blockchain.ieee.org, you can see all the information about what we do. We work on standards and, so today we have several speakers. I'll start with the list we have. We have Kavya Perlman. Then you want to go introduce yourself? Then I can just go one by one. You can go talk about yourself for a minute. Tell
Sure.
folks what you
Sure,
do.
as you like.
Yeah.
Yeah, so thanks, Ramesh. Very excited to participate in this panel, especially I've been listening to all these previous conversations. This is going to be a great discussion. So I'm Kavya Perlman, founder and CEO of XR Safety Initiative, XRSI. We are a standard developing organization, a 501c3 nonprofit that serves lots of different global governments, various different stakeholders like big tech organizations, policymakers. Our role is essentially, I've started to say that we are essentially defining or guiding what the North Star for the metaverse should look like. So I'll leave it at that and we'll get into other details later as we go through the panel. Thanks, Ramesh.
Thanks, Kavya. Where are you based?
Oh, I'm in San Francisco, but we have offices also in Italy. And we are also looking to expand to Canada and potentially Australia and India. So this is essentially a global entity. And next year is going to be quite remarkable, especially with Metaverse Standard Forum now there. There's just so much more collaboration that's emerging. So really looking forward to making a difference.
Okay, I'm in San Francisco this week as well.
Oh, great.
Let me move to Denisa. Denisa, please introduce yourself.
Yes, okay. So hi everyone. My name is Denisa Gana. I think that compared to the other speakers on this panel, I'm probably the baby out here in terms of not only age, but also obviously experience. Right, so currently I'm a partnerships manager for a Web3 startup called nifties.io. We basically help businesses to leverage NFTs in order to increase their revenue streams. Before that, I've also was the co-president of a nonprofit association. I was a community interest society led by students during my time in university at the University of Manchester, and we were called Blockchainers, and we've organized plenty of conferences, even attracted funding to organize an entrepreneurial competition for students in order to fund them with the necessary money in order to lift their ideas from ground up. And also social events and educational sessions to teach people how to code smart contracts in Solidity and so on. Yeah, so I think I caught the attention of one of your colleagues, Ramesh, after I published an article on HackerNoon called Debunking the Interoperability Myth powered by NFTs, which was basically just trying to tackle some common misconceptions that have spread around the environment on whether or not NFTs actually do help with interoperable assets within games. Yeah.
Thank you, Denisa. Next, Lee, you want to go next, Lee? I think you're on mute. You should unmute.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I can say that now. I'm a news aggregator. I like to find things that are out there from a variety of sources, keep all the politics out, and share with the world in an aggregated, organized fashion. One of the things I've been collecting in is the technology vertical of the metaverse. And I'll post in the chat box in a few minutes where you can go and read all these timely articles, because people worldwide are giving the metaverse topic deep thought. And what's driving it faster and faster is every time we create a technology, people start looking for, well, how can I use it? So the applications for the technologies, where there are electric transportation, IoT, metaverse, big data, they're out, driving the use of these things much faster. Metaverse is clearly becoming a tool. It's a tool that has built upon applications that were created for AR and VR. And with the information gathering and focusing that the metaverse brings to the table, I I don't think any of us can really say where we'll be in 2 years, much less 5 years. But I do think we have an obligation to make sure it's the right direction and goal that we're going in. There's a bunch of scary things out there that is sort of happening on the edge of the metaverse. People are being in these worlds of metaverse, people are being harassed and worse. And we have to make sure the safeguards are in place to, if I'm a young person and somewhere in the world and I want to join a metaverse location, I need to make sure, my parents need to make sure that I'm somehow protected. So let's make sure that our thoughts are towards the proper use of this technology, as well as the cybersecurity that is becoming in place to keep a bad guy from talking to 1 million kids between now and tomorrow.
Thanks, Lee. Next we have James. James, please go ahead.
I'm Dr. James Thomas, and I work at Google. I'm a senior program manager in cloud privacy. And so I'll be sharing a few opinions that are my personal opinions, not necessarily the opinions of my employer. But I have spent a few years in a couple of the different metaverses, and just looking forward to a good debate, good conversation today.
Cool. Thank you all. So let me start. Let's start this panel with the definition that, let me see if I can share, because a lot of folks here, I'm trying to share the definition of what a decentralized system is. Hope I can find the screen. Oh, there, I found it. You guys see the screen? Okay, so this is from the ISO document defining terminologies, taxonomy, ISO TC 307. You can see what it says here: decentralized system. System wherein control is distributed among the entities comprising this system, right? This is how much you will find in this ISO document. Now, let me stop sharing this. First of all, since the title is about, decentralized, centralized versus decentralized, I wanted to get views from each one of you. Let me share my view first. See, when you talk about, this centralization versus decentralization, it could be at different levels. It could be at the technology level. It could be at the, the governance level, like who controls, for example, the hardware or software, like who controls that. And it could be also at the economic level, right? And which is also the business, right? And it could also be the policy level, like there's several levels here, right? You have the technology, the governance, the business side, and then comes the policy level. So there's so many levels. In fact, I just put together a working group, a team of experts to define the term decentralization, because it's overused and there's a lot of confusion around that term, like decentralization, disintermediation, and so on. So, but that's my view. But let's hear from each one of you, like from what perspective are you looking at this, the term, decentralization, and then we can start getting into some of the details, because I want to get a sense of how, what's your view before we, get into all the weeds here. So let's start. Who wants to start? What's your, like, maybe for some reason I see Denisa on the picture here on the screen. Maybe you can go ahead. You wrote, a couple of articles and all that. So tell us your view on, what does decentralization mean to you?
Okay, do you want to discuss this within a metaverse context or just the term decentralization?
Just tell us what your view is on that. Yeah, what does it mean to you? What does decentralization mean to you?
I do actually agree with you've said that this term can unfold in multiple layers that are not necessarily technologically only related, but also like socially, philosophically, and so on. And I think that within the Web3 space, we've probably seen this with the rise of DAOs, But I think some people pronounce those DAOs, like decentralized autonomous organizations, where basically all of the members of the community act as if they're their own boss and like contribute whatever they can towards like the missions and the goals of the organization that they take part in. But I don't know, at least from my perspective, I think everything is clear. I don't think that the word decentralized is overused. I would rather say that the word metaverse is overused, especially probably for the past years. So yeah, I'm just curious to see what.
Okay. Okay, so who wants to go next? James?
Yeah, sure. I know we're comparing centralized versus decentralized, but I think a more of a hybrid approach would be better. Having some central authority, but federated decision making. Like right now, there are a lot of different metaverses, but they can't necessarily interact. If I have an asset in one metaverse, I can't necessarily move it to the next metaverse. So, in order to develop standards, in order to enforce standards, in order to grow, I think there should be some centralized organization, maybe similar to the DAOs that Denise mentioned, but also a separate individualized sub-federation that allows differentiation, because we don't necessarily want to control it to the point that it doesn't grow or squash its growth. So I think more of a hybrid approach would be better.
Interesting. Okay, so you're like going one step further, like find the best of both worlds or kind of thing, like hybrid approach. Okay, cool. Now let's hear from Kavya. You want to go next? Let's hear. I want to hear your perspectives.
Sure. And every time people say metaverses, I get triggered. So there is only one metaverse, and Roblox is not your metaverse. Second Life is not your metaverse, but that's not the topic here. The topic is decentralized and centralized, and it's kind of relevant because if we are talking about that one metaverse, the next iteration of the internet, and we allow centralized governance, and Ramesh, I'm with you. What you said earlier, there are several levels. And this is where I want to pull up that one kind of stack. We worked on this sort of a research to try to understand, hey, these risks are going to come to the metaverse from various different contexts. How are we going to tackle them? So let me quickly, I can't share the screen.
Well, is Jennifer there? She should be able to give you share access.
Okay, let me see. Can you guys see this?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to use this slide to kind of double, second the point, Ramesh, that you were making. A lot of the people kind of feel like, oh, they are building on blockchain and they've got this blockchain thing going on. Oh, they have a decentralized metaverse or decentralized virtual world. I would argue that that's not the way decentralized next iteration of the internet will exist. There are several levels, just like you said earlier. Because centralized versus decentralized, it's really about power and control. If it is a peer-to-peer in the hands of users, that power, or in the hands of citizens versus a centralized authority. So when we have the decentralization of that governance model, when we have the decentralization of potentially AI infrastructure, various other infrastructure, cloud computing infrastructure, quantum computing infrastructure, when we have these 2D, 3D modeling being created based off of some decentralized protocol that may not even have been invented yet, when we connect using, let's say, Matrix, some kind of other IM that is decentralized and not based on centralized protocols like we have today, and especially commerce. People are stopping right here at the commerce piece. They're like, oh, we got the blockchain-based economy, so we are all decentralized metaverse or virtual world. So that's what I want to kind of drive home is we have a long way to go before we actually get there. And while we get there, there's going to be centralized, decentralized, and various other forms of sort of hybrid based on all kinds of permutation combination that will exist. And the point, regardless what exists, XRSI exists to kind of ensure that we are safe, we're being inclusive, we're addressing the issues that could potentially even lead to genocide, like global issues. So I'll leave it at that and
Okay.
stop sharing.
Sounds like you were kind of like alluding to what James was talking about, the hybrid approach. Cool. Next, Lee,
Yes.
I didn't know you've been aggregating news on Metaverse. That's interesting. So let us know what you find, what you hear from the world and your own view on this topic of decentralized.
Well, I'm not muted right now. And in addition to Metaverse, there are 14 other technology verticals that I report on. I'm kind of an internet librarian, if you wish.
Okay.
But what I'm seeing across the world is the fact that Facebook/Meta is suddenly hitting a bit of a brick wall is making people that are been interested in Metaverse sort of back off a bit. And they're wondering if they can't make it work, why am I investing money? So I think we're in a little bit of pause in the advancement of the Metaverse, and that will give people like you see on this panel time to keep talking and continue to build the need and justify it with an ROI that says, hey, companies, institutions, whatever, let's gather together and put our questions on the table and figure out what the priority is of creating the applications or the things that we need to better manage, like cybersecurity around Metaverse, what order and how quickly we need to work on these things before the real applications that drive business and job growth can then take off again.
Cool. So now, there was a theme about Kavya and James, you're going in the direction like, there's going to be, the real world is going to be hybrid, right? In terms of, centralized, decentralized metaverse. So they all have to work together. I mean, they're going to have different strengths and weaknesses. So, but the thing is, now the question is interoperability, right? I mean, this is probably you hear it all the time in terms of like let's talk about like assets like NFTs, like let's hear from Denise. Denise, what's your view? I know you wrote an article on this topic, like NFTs can be used to represent assets. Now, tell us some of the issues you were talking in that paper. Then we will get into more details on like how you move things from one metaverse to another metaverse, and then now we talk about how you make centralized and decentralized metaverses interoperate and those kind of things, right? So tell us your some of the issues that you highlighted in your paper, the Medium article.
Okay, well, first of all, there is no metaverse. Like, honestly, what are we even talking about? All of those things that we currently call metaverses are just glamorized video games. And some of them are not even that fun to play, or they are not even that good. They only rose to fame because people were able to speculate on NFTs and buy, say, land in, I don't know, Decentraland or stuff like that. And people just see this as a become rich, extremely quickly scheme. I personally think that we should really ground ourselves a bit and probably realize how privileged you are in this part of the world to talk about super fancy stuff like metaverses and virtual reality and all that stuff when 37% of our global population cannot currently connect to the internet. And there's probably even like a greater percentage, I would assume like 40 or even like half of the world population doesn't even have a working smartphone to connect to the internet. So I just can't help but wonder how we ended up having this conversation, and why is this narrative pushed at the forefront of all of those like conferences and media articles and news so much, when we actually have so many other problems to sort out? And honestly, because you asked us about decentralization, so we don't really have the infrastructure to do anything in this sense. Because if you think about it, 95% of our internet is basically secured by undersea cables, right? And only 5% by satellites and all that kind of stuff. If we would have, say, a metaverse, that would result in us, like humanity, producing so much more data, probably, I don't know, triple or even more than what we're currently producing. We don't really have the infrastructure to transmit all of this data so fast from one side to the other side of the world. And probably the moment where those Web3 companies or startups or video games, whatever you want to call themselves, would start investing in this infrastructure, someone is going to take them seriously, that they really want to do something. But for now, I kind of became desensitized to this whole thing. Probably you already know that this term metaverse was used like decades ago, and there is a reason why it became fashionable today to discuss about this, and it wasn't like fashionable to discuss about metaverse 10 years ago. So yeah, I think we should really ground ourselves and just like acknowledge how privileged we are to have such problems. Yeah, and to also think about who exactly is pushing this narrative, because I think that humanity does indeed have much greater problems than the decentralization of centralization or whatever in the metaverse that doesn't exist, to be honest.
Okay, so now I see you're going in the social impact direction. So now, yeah, whatever you said is all valid points, are valid points. Now, I want to kind of like make it simple for folks in the, participating. I see 200 people on the call. So typically when people use these terms.
Sorry, just to add one more thing,
Yeah.
and James, because he's here, he said that he works for Google, could probably contribute with a lot more technical information than I can. But honestly, I think I see all of the time companies like Google and Microsoft and Amazon et al. Being really like in the corner for the way they handle consumers' data, and for also always being the bad guys in this whole ecosystem. And while I do believe that the way they handle all of these data, and only the fact that they have the access to our personal information so much puts them in a super position of power, and they should be held accountable and so on. But on the same time, these are the companies that basically invest the most in servers and the infrastructure that we need as a society to function. And if we didn't have this, then we would have collapsed. So yeah.
Okay, we'll see if we can get into some of those things later. So what I wanted to simplify is like typically when you hear about centralized metaverses, people are referring to metaverses being built by companies such as Meta, Facebook, Microsoft, and all the big companies, right? They're all like,
there's just a game that is branded as a metaverse just to ride the hype.
So yeah, that's the term. Like, let's hear from others too, and then that's how people, when centralized metaverse, they're talking about big companies building, these metaverses where you can see, like there's the VR, AR headset, and now when the term decentralized metaverse is used to refer to, like Denise was pointing out, like primarily games, and those games are pretty, some of them are pretty preliminary games, and they are built on, using blockchain-based tokens, and so when you play those games, you earn points in terms of tokens, and those tokens have value. You can go sell it outside. So but the game itself is not that sophisticated.
I'm sorry, I have to stop you here.
Yeah.
Okay, so first of all,
let's
when you say that a game is built
let's hear
on
from
blockchain,
others.
that is more like a metaphor. Okay, so you cannot basically store all of the information on a blockchain. You have to store that information somewhere else, probably in a cloud, and then the token that is stored on a blockchain accesses that information from the cloud. If you actually check the websites of some of those really popular games nowadays, you'd see that they are stored on like Amazon Web Services or something like that. Because there are many layers of decentralization when you're building an app itself. Is the back end and the front end as well. So that's like one side of the question, and then the other side, I'm sorry, but I actually forgot what you said.
That's fine. We could, well, let's hear from others. Like, let's say, Kavya, you want to talk about, like this, I know you and James were talking about this hybrid, where the interoperability there's an issue, like the standards, right? The data format. So yeah, to share us your views on that, Kavya.
I want to pick up a little bit on what Denise was saying is, we've got so many problems in this world. Why are we talking about the metaverse? Why are we talking about the metaverse, especially at XRSI, is because we, as a collective, the inclusive, sort of a very carefully crafted key advisors, and more are coming, are in a place like, with our collective identity to kind of address these things as this fast moving train is going, to put some guardrails, to provide some kind of a safe, inclusive context to be built, to be baked in these uncharted territories. And that's why, Denisa, it is imperative that we participate in these conversations, because you're right, there are tremendous issues, and if we don't deliberately sort of intervene, then these challenges are going to be amplified. Then we can't complain about, oh my God, all the power is with Meta now, and there is no decentralization, and individuals have no authority or power, because we never took the time to participate and contribute our perspective. I am grateful to be able to sitting next to IEEE folks and Chronos and Metaverse Data Forum. This is exactly what, this is exactly how we're going to change things and take that power out of the hands of these massive corporations and sort of nudge them, sort of like in a grassroots way, to not just create interoperability standards, but like intraoperability. It's a word that Zuckerberg used, interoperability. Yes, using an object in another game or this thing, that's great. But how about we create standards that are intraoperable? Objects that can move from one virtual world to the other virtual world. And, I did mention in my introduction, I was working for Second Life maker Linda Lab back in 2018. So I have firsthand seen sort of like the compliance, when policymakers jump in to try to make sense of things, and then they shoot from the hip and they issue GDPR like 200-page legal document. People like me, the directors of security, heads of security, we have to make sense of it and then figure out, oh my God, overnight, we don't have access to any of the cybercrime data because they didn't think about the protocols. So that's the opportunity here, is get in front of these technical considerations that could literally make life difficult, potentially dangerous. It's literally happening. Yesterday, Walmart, announced that they're going to be selling to children in Roblox.
Right. Toys. Yeah.
Oh my God. Just about a couple of weeks ago, I told FTC that coding for engagement should be banned on children. Advertisement should be banned on children, and we'll go further. So that's the opportunity. We are privileged. We should use that privilege to inform particular policymakers, individuals, create this grassroots movement, because this is the only time we're going to have to shift that power. After that, we have ourselves to blame.
Yeah.
This company's going to try to maintain that status quo.
This is the time to have the discussions and make sure all inputs are heard from different stakeholders, and that's policy making and so on. So now let's talk to James. James, what's your view on all this, the data part of it? Like, so much data is going to be generated, and the storage, metaverses, like whether it's centralized or decentralized, doesn't matter. There's going to be a lot of data produced from these metaverses. Like, what's your view on
Yeah,
that, James?
that's kind of a reason why we need to be talking about this, because now we're at a time where all of these technologies of big data and blockchain and AI and ML are converging. And so we do need to have platforms that are scalable. And that's one of the problems that we have right now with some of the NFT platforms. They just, can't really scale to deal with the volume of transactions. And so what's happened in some of these situations is that a major corporation of some type usually takes on that role of developing a scalable solution. It would be good if companies could work together on developing a scalable system, but it's tough to do it like in a blockchain fashion with a bunch of peer-to-peer networks. It takes a lot of money and a lot of resources. What is our was it Kavya worked for Linden Labs, and she could probably tell you that it's hard finding folks that have security and metaverse technology experience, as well as being able to understand the type of CPU and GPU and other resources that are needed in order to make it scalable, but at the same time provide access to folks that may not have the bandwidth. So it's a pretty complex situation. So it does require some major corporations to spend major dollars. So a lot of these corporations we may be a bit afraid of because they may have had, some record of not being compliant with our privacy regulations. There are companies that are major corporations that, for whatever reason, they cross the line somewhere in privacy. So folks are a little bit afraid of them taking over the metaverse. But at the same time, who's got the wherewithal to do it?
Yeah.
So if we could get some type of I don't want to say regulatory body, but some type of a group working together and get some of these large corporations that have the networks and the bandwidth and the CPU power, the compute power to do it, I think we can make a much better metaverse. And now's the time to have those conversations and work with companies that are going to make certain commitments to user privacy. Because when you start collecting folks' data, it's got to be stored securely. And then a lot of, depending on the region that data is collected in, right now, folks want their data to stay in their region. And also they want to be able to manage the encryption keys themselves. So there's certain things that I think could really help. But I personally would like to see companies working together on building a metaverse together as a consortium. It's kind of like what Android did with the handset alliance, although now Samsung's kind of dominating the Android handset alliance. But sometimes it takes a team to do major developments like the metaverse.
Yeah, thanks, James. I see somebody already posted. I was going to talk about this. So, in fact, recently, two organizations were launched, alliances, right? Like one is called the Metaverse Standards Forum, which, when I look at the members, seems to be a lot of big companies. The Metaverse Standards Forum. You can just Google it. Maybe somebody can put the link there. If you're there, just post the link there. Metaverse Standards Forum. And then the other one I came across called I think it's the OMA 3, like Open Metaverse Alliance, I believe. That's, if I look at the list there, the companies are like primarily what we call as the decentralized metaverse or blockchain based. So we have like, two different organizations at this point, James. But anyway, that's let's see if they can figure out a way to work together. But let's, Lee, you have any thoughts on like standards and interoperability and things like that? And sounds like the theme has been now is like, hybrid approach and collaboration. That's the theme right now.
Well, IEEE, as usual, is a great place to create standards. And there's, things happening within the world of standards that are moving and starting to move metaverse into a more organized, what we call framework. If we let the other competition, they call themselves industry alliances, if we let them do the work of a standard creation, it will be product focused. It'll be focused on how one company has created its view of what the metaverse is all about. So take a look at what IEEE is doing in the world of metaverse. I participated in an IEEE standards meeting this morning, and it was metaverse on a number of what they call PARs, PAR, to get the ball rolling in the world of metaverse. And frankly, there was probably too many of them. So standards will minimize the number of the metaverse standard proposals into a more organized way of taking us from right now to where a group of people that happen to be international thinks we should be in metaverse. Stay tuned.
I posted the links to those two organizations in the chat box, so you can check them out.
All right.
And then, of course, the IEEE, you mentioned about IEEE, we have this Metaverse Congress, and this is our third event, and we have several working groups, and you can check out what we're up to.
Oh,
and
FYI, I also have an IEEE blockchain magazine.
Oh, cool. Okay. And now, I know I kind of started this topic earlier, and maybe I will try to bring it back again about the topic of NFTs. And, perhaps, Kavya, you can, if you have some thoughts, and others, what's the role of NFTs in these metaverses we're talking about?
Ramesh, and because NFTs are so misunderstood. What is an NFT? It's really just financial security token. It's a pointer that exists on the blockchain that points to a unique record. Unlike Bitcoin, it can't be replicated. It's literally the only record that's uniquely attributable. Now, that opens a world of possibility. We can now connect any kind of music, potential files, music, any asset in digital world or in real world to this pointer. And that means we've created a way to ownership, especially, here in America, we have laws and things like that. We have enforcement mechanisms. Go to Africa, NFTs could uniquely be used for literally combat election fraud, because the unique attribute of that one pointer. And that's what we need to realize is NFTs potentially are going to be so essential. And right now, the whole scarcity thing, but I'm sure fast forward in the future, we'd be like, oh, that particular NFT was made by a human, and this is the record that exists, and that's why the scarcity of that particular thing creates more value and adds to economy. So I believe that's the whole thing, is we need to understand NFTs is really just a way to attribute to virtual assets, virtual goods. And virtual goods is what, Second Life, we traded these things to create an economy. In Metaverse, that's precisely what would happen, but more than just virtual assets. Many digital, physical assets could be attributed to that unique pointer, which can then be utilized to now create that value or expand the economy. And I think that's where NFT, kind of is misunderstood. People think, oh, it's a sham, it's a scam. They never take the time to actually study what this technology really is.
So we have only 4 minutes left. I want to quickly jump onto an interesting topic. So we've been talking about this, how, centralized and decentralized metaverses, they have to work together like hybrid and collaboration. And now we're talking about NFT. So now identity, is an important thing in this, right? If you're talking about being able to, move from one to another, like today, like, we have to log into every website, right? We have to have a separate login password. Like, there are apps try to integrate, but how is it going to be addressed in the case of metaverses? Like if you're talking about a hybrid experience for an user, let's say, my identity is an NFT. How can I like use that to log in to access all these different metaverses? Or is it even possible? I want to hear from, we have only 3 minutes. I want to hear from each one of you because we've been kind of like talking about like we need to collaborate, we need to create like a hybrid, model. But then, are we going to have 100 logins, 100 NFTs or whatever, like and one NFT for every metaverse? Let's see what you guys have to say about that.
If you tokenize your identity as an NFT, then technically you'd have to connect your wallet where the NFT is stored to the app that you're trying to access. And then the app that you're trying to access should scan your wallet in order to detect the NFT and make sure that you is you. Or you would have to whitelist your wallet address somehow across a variety of apps. I'm not sure how this would work in the future, but basically this is like the main mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
But then the other side of the coin for this is if people know that you is you and what your wallet address is, then basically they can go to say Etherscan and see how much money you have, what were the last transactions that you did, whom did you send money to, and all of that kind of stuff. So
Yeah, I could give the privacy, identity and privacy that are like really, tied, Now, let's hear from like James. Any thoughts on that? You were the guy who were really talking about this hybrid model. Sounds good to me. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, if we can ever get interoperability or intraoperability between the metaverses, that'd be one level. But even just having permissionless, blockchain identities. I mean, right now, we're having so much trouble trying to identify malactors that we have. Can you imagine if we're not able to identify, these folks, how much malice can happen in a metaverse? So, I tend to prefer a little bit more of a centralized control and be able to identify who has access or who can join. So that's kind of my theory on it because we just can't trust folks.
Okay, Lee, any thoughts on the identity, privacy also? Now we're talking about privacy as well.
The key thing is
Sorry, go ahead, Lee.
The key thing is to make sure the right people are talking. We've got to have momentum. We've got to have solid discussions with detail to back it up, because there are other groups around the world, in addition to what I see on the screen right now, that have their own opinions, and their own agendas. So we've got to get ready and move fast.
Cool. I think we're running out of time. Maybe Kavya, you have a few words on this, and we will close it.
And thank you. I think I want to pick up, we talked about NFT, but I want to pick up Ben Irving's question where he's, in the chat, it's like, when talking about regulations, there needs to be criteria to qualify regulators, regulatory body, legislative body. So I understand, James, you said there needs to be some kind of centralized, body or something. What I believe is we really need to work together with policymakers, with big tech companies, because that's the problem. Policymakers don't understand what the tech is doing oftentimes. We have seen that prior. And then tech companies don't necessarily have the best interest of the citizens in mind because they're by design for profit. And this is where sort of like, I would say, civic organizations, policymakers, companies, we need to collaboratively, and that's what we are seeing happen at the Metaverse Standard Forum. We're collaboratively working together with IEEE, with several other Responsible Metaverse Alliance from Australia, working together to potentially answer these very questions. Because I mean, what's happening in Iran? Like, people with centralized ecosystems will inevitably be shut down when the system experiences pressure, political pressure, various agenda, as Lee was saying. So these are important conversations that we need to have. One of the, and I just want to leave at, we have this Metaverse Safety Week where we are conducting this intervention, XRSI-led awareness campaign. We'll hear from Congress people. We'll hear from worldwide regulators. We'll hear from CPSC, FDA, etc. And I want to invite everyone to contribute and take part in these discussions and lead them to our own accord. Companies should lead them and prove to us that they're going to be better data stewards of our future. Just because you failed previously, it's only an opportunity to learn better and do better. So now is the time to sort of sing kumbaya on the premise that we are going to do better. We're going to build a better internet that is, inclusive, open, it has fairness, and we're going to find those answers where their malicious actors are handled not just in a centralized way, not just, don't trade privacy for safety or safety for privacy. Let's find a balance together.
Well, I think you're 2 minutes over time. We should
Sorry.
probably, I thought we would maybe a quick closing thought from each one of you. So yeah, let's do a quick, keep it brief, a few words of, let's start with Denise. Denisa, you have any closing thoughts?
Oh, that would be hard to decide on which thought to be the closing one, to be honest.
I see. Okay.
Perhaps you can leave me the last.
Okay. James, any closing thoughts?
I just want to say that first, thank you for having me on here. I really look forward to a day when the metaverse can be interoperable, and I really think that hybrid is the way to go. And
Okay.
seeing a better metaverse.
Lee, any closing thoughts?
Please share names and contact information. We've got to work together.
Cool. Okay. Collaboration. Kavya, any closing thoughts?
My closing thoughts are, please take part in Metaverse Safety Week in December. It is essential that we collaborate and highlight the issues of safety, privacy, inclusivity, identity, and of course, decentralized metaverse all the way.
Well, Denise, one more chance. You have anything you want to share?
Yeah, okay. So I think the last remark that I want to make is that a blockchain is only as good as the information that is inputted in it. So that's the thing that all of us have to remind. And thank you for having me as well.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you all for speaking, and also participants. And I know this is going to be recorded and shared. So thank you.
Thank you all. This is IEEE. We really appreciate your time. This was a wonderful session, and we will be in touch soon. Take care. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.